Chapter 1184. After Tao Jinhong released the abyss toad's soul, he didn't chase it away immediately. Instead, he flicked his sleeve and placed a gray stone body on the table. This was the toad's original physical body. When the monster toad was in his hands, its vitality wasn't completely depleted. Thus, he used a special method to refine it. If the two were to be combined, not only would its original abilities be intact, it would also be able to unleash greater power. More importantly, those who didn't know the inside story wouldn't be able to see through it. This could cause the opponent to make a wrong judgment. He used a spell and sent the soul into the stone body. It was his own physical body, so it was naturally very compatible. After a short while, a spiritual light rushed up to the surface of the sea. The abyss toad broke out of the stone body and let out a strange hiss. Instantly, it grew to a size of 10,000 feet. With one leap, it brought along a giant shadow and headed towards South Cliff Continent. After releasing the monster, Tao Jinhong didn't do anything else. He knew that Yuxiao School wouldn't let him succeed so easily. There should be some kind of setup, but he didn't know what it was. This monster toad was a natural variant that could swallow continents. If no one paid attention to it, the huge South Cliff Continent could be swallowed whole by it. If everything went smoothly, he could force the opponent's tricks out in the open. On Mo Chiu Cliff, only Wu Yunbi and Zhou Ruing were left. However, they were still recovering their spiritual energy. They thought that it would be peaceful for a while, but they sensed a monstrous monster aura pressing down on them. They couldn't help but be shocked. After a closer look, they realized that it was the South Sea. They couldn't sit still anymore. South Cliff Continent was Yuxiao School's base. If it was destroyed, even if they destroyed Qinsong School, it wouldn't be considered a victory. The two of them were about to fly out to help. However, they heard a voice beside their ears. If the two of you go out, who will guard the gate? If you are attacked, do you need someone to resolve it? The two of them paused and asked in shock, Hall Master Kongjing? Jinren Kongjing's voice rang again. I have already made arrangements. All of you just have to guard the door. Without my orders, even if the Southern Cliffs continent is destroyed, do not act recklessly. The two of them could only obediently accept the order and return. After receiving Kongjing's instruction, Taoist Master Bai Bai came out halfway. At this moment, he had already turned to the South Sea. He had originally thought that even though Tao Jinhong and the others had obtained the support of the Qinsong School, they could only cause some disturbance at most. Seeing the abyss toad come out, he couldn't help but feel surprised. His thoughts spun and he realized that apart from him, there was no other way to stop this monster. Abyss toads usually had two ways to deal with powerful enemies. One was to open their mouth and swallow. Even if people from the heavenly abode were to enter its stomach, it would be hard for them to escape. If they were unlucky, they would lose their lives. When they couldn't do anything to their opponents, they would do their best to make their bodies even larger in order to resist the attacks of external forces. It was rumored that it could become as big as a continent. It was for this reason that just now, it had attracted the ancient cultivators to hunt it down. Taoist Master Bai Bai originally thought that there was no such thing in this world. He didn't expect Tao Jinhong to have one. He sighed and no longer hid himself. He stood out from the darkness and blocked the monster's path. Li Xiaomi stared at him and said, looking at this person, he should be the Yuxiao School's Hall Master Bai Bai. I heard that this person isn't much weaker than that Wu Daoren. Tao Jinhong pondered for a while and said, he might be even harder to deal with. Wu Riyang is from the Wu clan, and when he fought with us, his mana is not as strong as before because of his lifespan. He doesn't have many treasures on him either. Li Xiaomi said, Tao Jinren is right. With the abyss toad leading the way, we can test his abilities. Then we will see how to deal with him. This time, their goal is no longer to invade, but to threaten the Yuxiao School's rear. So, we have to think of a way to defeat this person. The abyss toad's body was huge. With just a few leaps, it had already crossed the Fengling Ocean. When it saw Taoist Master Bai Bai, it opened its mouth. In a split second, it seemed like a hole was torn open between heaven and earth, producing a huge suction force that caused an immeasurable amount of seawater to pour into it. Taoist Master Bai Bai didn't release his Dharma, He just used his mana and stabilized his body. He also roughly estimated the level of this abyss toad and thought that it was easy to deal with. Although it was a mutated species, as long as it hadn't crossed that barrier, it wasn't too difficult to deal with. Back then, the Yuxiao school cultivators killed countless poisonous insects and mutated species in the southern cliff continent, so they had many ways to deal with them. He took out a colorful fragment from his sleeve and sprinkled it outside. With a turn of the wind, it floated towards the abyss toad's mouth. This thing was called Lai Tsusha. It was actually made by sacrificing a kind of demonic insect and star sand. It was also left behind by a sect that was once destroyed by the Yuxiao school. It was specially used to deal with huge monsters like the demon toad. As long as a little bit of it went into the stomach, it could use its blood to breed millions of insects that would corrode the internal organs. As long as it didn't encounter a monster like the ancient sky demon, it would be enough to deal with it. When Tao Jinhong saw it, he knew that the opponent made a mistake and his expression instantly brightened. In a battle, sometimes a small mistake could determine life and death. Now that he saw the opponent making a mistake, how could he not take advantage of this opportunity? He said, "Fellow Taoists, please make your move." Mi Jinren was already waiting for him to make his move. As soon as he heard his words, he immediately pressed his fingers together and with a wave of his hand, a black and a white blade ray split the sea waves and flew out. Li Xiaomi cast a xian horn to the sky and shot it down from above. It was not to hurt the opponent, but to restrain him. Enlightened Master Bai glanced at it casually and with just a point, a ray of clear light flew out from his fingertip and easily destroyed the flying blade ray. The light was neither more nor less. It just melted the blade ray and just now, it completely disappeared. As for the xian horn on top of his head, he didn't pay much attention to it. With a shake of his sleeve, it actually disappeared without a trace. No one knew where it went. Li Xiaomi made a hand sign and summoned it. She could feel that the xian horn was still there, but she couldn't summon it back. She immediately knew that the xian horn was hit by the Yuxiao school's bright sky spinning illumination. This treasure was fixed by the opponent's star chi and fell into the disordered space domain created by the Yuxiao school. If she didn't eliminate the opponent, she wouldn't be able to retrieve it. Tao Jinren's expression became more serious. He could see that in that instant, this person actually used 3 xian horn consecutively. Moreover, there was no trace of delay between the retraction and release of the xian horn, as if it was released in one breath. If Wu Riyang had cultivated his cultivation to the extreme, then this person had used xian horn's Dao techniques to the acme of perfection. Facing such an opponent, he became even more cautious. However, the purpose of this attack was achieved. The demon toad used this opportunity to bite down and engulfed an area of tens of thousands of miles. Spiritual Master Bai saw that the demon toad didn't have any abnormalities and couldn't help but be surprised. According to what was said, when the Lai Tsusha entered the stomach, it wouldn't take more than 10 breaths for it to take effect. However, this demon toad acted as if nothing had happened. It was either that his previous attack was restrained by the opponent, or he made a mistake. He immediately sensed it, and after probing it a little, he knew that he had misjudged it. He snorted but didn't feel the slightest bit annoyed. Instead, he even had the leisure to praise it a few times. He took out a hand seal, and with a flash of lightning, he escaped into the cave. The next moment, his figure appeared out of thin air in the high heavens. If the cultivators of the cave went in and out of the cave outside the mountain gate, they would usually consume a lot of mana and couldn't return to the original place. However, he was different. Although he wasn't good at mana, he was gifted. In the path of Xian Horn's Tao of transformations, he surpassed everyone in the sect. 1 part of mana could do 10 parts of things. Not talking about cultivation, just talking about this path, even Jinren Kongjing was far inferior to him. He pressed his hand down, and there was a clear light falling down, almost covering the sea in an instant. When the demon toad was illuminated by this light, its body melted away. Even the soul essence below it couldn't bear it and showed signs of disintegration. Tao Jinhong saw this and knew that the demon toad couldn't fight with him at all. Thus, he made a prompt decision and opened the walking beast diagram. With a call, the soul essence turned into a spiritual light, abandoned its body, and flew back. However, when it fell on the diagram, it became a lot dimmer. Obviously, it was injured a lot. If it wanted to be used again, it would need to be nourished for a period of time. Spiritual Master Bai turned his head and looked at the direction of the spiritual light. He didn't have any expression on his face, but deep in his eyes, there was a trace of killing intent. For him, it wasn't difficult to defeat this person. The difficult part was how to make him stay. After flying for half a day from the mountain gate of the Butian Pavilion, they arrived above the Qing River. When they reached this place, they stopped. Zhenren Kongjing used the excuse of attacking Qinsong School to pass down a decree. He wanted all the cultivators of the Heavenly Passage sects to gather at the big pavilion. Once this order was issued, no one from the 3 sects dared to disobey. Each sect only left one person to guard the sect, and the rest all came to listen to the order. However, it was not easy to gather all the forces of the sects in one place. Although all the sect masters were there, and they had already discussed it in detail, it still took several hours to arrange everything properly. Just as they were about to cross the Qing River, they suddenly heard the sound of surging water. It seemed like it was right next to their ears, but it also seemed like it was far away in the sky. Zhenren Kongjing seemed to have thought of something. His expression changed, and he suddenly turned around. When he looked back, he saw that there was a vast white gas behind him, and he couldn't see the end of it from the front to the back. Everyone was surprised and bewildered when they saw this scene. Xiao Lingyun asked in a low voice, "Is this the method of Qinsong School?" Zhenren Kongjing couldn't see through the details, and it was hard for him to differentiate. At this time, a voice suddenly entered his ears. It was a change in the technique. He listened carefully for a moment, took a deep breath, turned around, and said in a low voice, "Just now, esteemed master transmitted a message to me. This is the mysterious technique of Qinsong School. This white river can separate the 2 worlds. If it isn't broken, even if I travel for tens or hundreds of years, it will still be difficult for me to reach the other side." Shang Shooting frowned and said, "This mysterious technique of Qinsong School is actually not blocking the way in front, but cutting off the road behind. This is clearly cutting off my return path." Zhenren Kongjing looked towards the direction of the Mochiyu cliff. He felt that Qinsong School's intentions were not that simple. Moreover, if someone were to attack Southern Cliff Continent, he wouldn't be able to use treasures to help. Chapter 1185. The white qi traveled across the horizon, stretching from west to east, cutting off the north and south. Enlightened Master Bai also saw it. With his knowledge, he could roughly guess that this was the doing of Qinsong School. However, he did not mind. Even without help, he was confident that he could still win this battle. His expression did not change as he held the rui of steadying in his hand and did not move an inch. The opponents were protected by formation plates. If he took the initiative to attack, even if he could break through, he would have to pay a heavy price. Since the other party had come for the Southern Cliffs continent and had created such a huge commotion just now, it was obvious that they were acting under the orders of the Dark Azure sect. They wouldn't give up so easily. He believed that it would not be long before they came looking for him again. He just had to wait. Once they fought, he would have the chance to take his life. In the deep sea formation plate, Li Xiaomi saw that the opponent's divine art was powerful and thought of avoiding the main attack. He said, "Most of the cultivators from Yuxiao School are heading north to attack Qinsong. He is the only one here to stop us, but there are 3 of us. Why don't we split up and attack?" Tao Zhenhong thought for a while and rejected, "It is too risky." Taoistly, if this plan was in the past, he would not be able to split himself. However, enlightened Master Bai would not leave such a big gap. He might have some kind of teleportation talisman on him and is waiting for me to walk into his trap. If the 3 of them work together, they could still contend with him. However, if they split up, the opponent could use teleportation and take them down one by one. Moreover, it was impossible for Mochiyu Cliff to not leave a single mountain guard behind. If the opponent threw in a talisman to help, it would be even harder to defend. Li Xiaomi thought again and said, "If that is the case, we cannot avoid this person if we want to attack Southern Cliff's continent. Tao Zhenhong's gaze seemed to sharpen. He said, it doesn't matter if we cannot avoid him. We just have to fight him. Compared to the battle with Wu Riang, this time, not only did he have the spirit of the Chua Dragon, he also had the 36 mountains. With the three of them together, he had a higher chance of winning. Li Xiaomi turned to look at Mi Zhenren. He asked, what do you think? Mi Zhenren didn't care about the specifics. She only asked, when do we do it? Tao Zhenhong pondered for a moment and put away the planar beasts in his hand. He said, let's go and see who's the winner. Enlightened being Bai waited on the sea for less than an hour before he sensed something. He looked up and saw 3 rays of light flying towards him. He couldn't help but smile. He revealed an expression as if he had expected it. The 3 streaks of light quickly arrived before him and split up. Tao Zhenhong stood in the center and bowed, saying, Zhenren Zhou, please excuse me. Enlightened being Bai waved his sleeve and said, it's fine, it's just that we have our own masters. Mi Zhenren frowned. He replied coldly, what do you mean by that? Qin Song and I are not master and servant, but allies. Taoist Master Bai chuckled. With a hint of disdain on his face, he said, is that so? Li Xiaomi laughed and said, it must be because your esteemed sect has been treating the other sects as servants for a long time, that's why you treat us like this? He originally wanted to use his words to stab him, but he didn't expect Taoist Master Bai to act like this was how it should be. He said, the strong are respected while the weak are humble. It's natural for the capable to be at the top. I, Yu Xiao, am the master, and the other sects are the servants. Why can't I? You think you're different, but you don't know that you're just a few chess pieces in the hands of Qinsong School that can be discarded at any time. Tao Zhenren didn't want to argue with him and said, today is a battle of life and death. What's the point of talking about this? Enlightened being Bai glanced at the 3 of them and said, then I'll ask for your wisdom. Mi Zhenren didn't like him, so as soon as he finished speaking, she was the first to move. Facing such an opponent, she didn't hold back at all. She summoned a jade drum in the sky. As the drum vibrated, countless thin threads appeared in the atmosphere. At the same time, she put 2 fingers together, raised her hand, and slashed out several rays of saber qi. Li Xiaomi didn't fall behind, and immediately blew out a black smoke from her mouth. This smoke looked normal, but it was refined by the mirage qi left behind by the dead mirage worm. As long as it came into contact with the body, it would cause the opponent to fall into a trance. And in a battle, this kind of carelessness was enough to be fatal. Tao Zhenhong didn't make a move yet, but he was ready. In their previous discussion, it was very likely that the opponent would use the vast cloud of 1 breath of heaven. He didn't know how to break out of the trap, but as long as he was prepared, he would have a way to avoid it. The 3 of them didn't talk about what happened before, but after fighting a few times with Yu Xiao School in the Southern Sea, they knew each other's methods, and their teamwork was quite good. And what was rare was that the cultivators of the world grotto heaven, in order to preserve their spiritual energy, most of them hadn't fought with anyone for hundreds or even thousands of years. Compared to them, they could be considered as veterans of the battle. Spiritual Master Bai saw the attack from both sides, and he calmly circulated his spiritual energy. The jade scepter flew up from his hand, and instantly stopped the incoming qi. Then he waved his other hand, and a dazzling clear light was released. In the blink of an eye, whether it was the saber qi or the black smoke, they were all melted by the light. Spiritual pivot jade clear light? The 3 of them saw it and quickly dodged. Spiritual Master Bai's reaction was expected. At his level of cultivation, he didn't need to pay attention to strategies, and he could just use his divine arts to subdue the enemy. He also knew that if the opponent was prepared, they could also find a way to break this divine art. But he was different from others, his divine arts were at the acme of perfection, and he could casually shoot out dozens of them. The spiritual pivot jade clear light was the 2nd divine art in the sect, and it was extremely powerful. It might be possible for the opponent to deal with one, but to deal with dozens of them at once, he didn't believe it at all. After Tao Zhenren retreated far away, he already understood that unless his divine art was stronger than the opponent's, or his spiritual energy was far stronger than the opponent's, then he wouldn't be able to face it head-on, or else he could only avoid it. But if he didn't have any other moves, he wouldn't choose to fight. So, he opened the source diagram and walking beast diagram, and with a swipe of his hand, a long dragon that looked like a fine jade fell down. Spiritual Master Bai Bai thought it was a flood dragon, but when he recognized the breath, he immediately felt something was wrong, and his expression changed. Heavenly Demon's soul essence? His expression instantly became extremely solemn, even though heavenly demons could no longer be seen in the world, but the record still existed, and he was very clear that normal divine arts were useless against heavenly demons. If it was a one-on-one fight, he might still have a chance, but if there were 3 of his peers by his side, he really might not be able to win. He sneered, "I thought you guys dared to come out and fight with me, so you have this to rely on. I initially thought that I wouldn't need to use that thing to take down these few people, but if I don't use it now, I'm afraid there will be some changes." He took out a ball of star sand from his sleeve. Just now, there was a bright light coming out from the gap between his fingers, but strangely, the surroundings suddenly darkened, as if all the light outside his body was attracted to it. When Tao Jinren saw it, his expression changed. Although he didn't know what the opponent took out, he could feel that once this thing was taken out, the spiritual vigor in the surroundings started to fluctuate violently. Without thinking, he quickly moved back, and at the same time he shouted, "Fellow Taoists, retreat quickly." Spiritual Master Bai Bai sneered and said, "Too late." He didn't dare to hold this thing in his hand for too long, and as he spoke, he shook his sleeve and threw it out. In an instant, it was as if there was an additional bright Milky Way in the south of the 9 continents, connecting the heaven and the earth. Even the cultivators in the far north could see it. In Bu Tian Pavilion, Jinren Kangzheng looked back, stroked his beard, and said, "There's no need to worry about the South Sea." Under the West Sea's eye, Zhang Yan was also paying attention to the situation in the South Sea. When he saw this scene, his gaze also froze, and he said, "Divine myriad celestial star sand. I didn't expect Zhou Liquang to bring this thing with him. I'm afraid the 3 Taoists won't be able to pass this hurdle." This item was passed down by the Yuxiao patriarch Yao Han, and in terms of power, it was not inferior to the all heavens combined divine water forbidden light in the Qinsong school. He had heard Zhou Chongju say that because this sand was not easy to refine, and because of the changes in the spiritual energy of the world in the past 10,000 years, there was not much in the Yuxiao school. Even in the heavenly grottos, if one wasn't from the Zhou family's direct bloodline, they would not be able to get their hands on it. This kind of thing was enough to be used as a killing move when fighting with the cultivators of the Qinsong school, but he didn't expect it to be used on the South Sea. He wanted to completely end this matter once and for all, so that the rear would not be threatened again. This price was huge, but looking at the overall situation, it was not incomprehensible. Zhang Yan thought about it again. At this moment, the retreat of the Yuxiao people and their allies had been cut off by Xian Shu, and temporarily could not come back to help the southern cliff continent. It could be said that it was abnormally empty, and the danger of their retreat was so easily resolved, it was too easy for them. He pondered for a while and looked outside. The tribulation fire outside did not show any signs of dissipating. It was impossible to hope for it to dissipate on its own. The few profound techniques that the Yuxiao school had previously sent out were still being used on the 9 continents, and had yet to dissipate. The tribulation fire would not dissipate so easily unless there was an external force to destroy it. However, this did not mean that he could not move. One had to know that the demon treasury could also move and escape. The only concern was that after moving to another place, the demon treasury would be discovered by others. However, this was different from just now. After hiding under the eye of the sea, so much time had passed, and no one would waste their magic power to keep staring at this place. He could be a little more daring. After thinking for a while, he took out a spell. After a short while, there was a rumbling sound. With a shift of the demon treasury, it was already outside the eye of the sea. As expected, the tribulation fire also chased after him. He ignored it and continued to use the demon treasury to teleport. After many tries, he found out that the further away he was from the tribulation fire, the faster it would chase after him. However, if the distance between the two of them was only tens of thousands of miles, he would be able to shake it off. Only after a long period of time would he be able to close in again. Although he did not understand the reason behind it, he felt that he could use this to do something. As he continued to use his mana to teleport, without anyone noticing, he had unknowingly arrived at the top of the southern sea. When he arrived, he sensed that with his current speed, the tribulation fire would only arrive in about an hour. This period of time was enough for him to settle the matters outside. Thus, he held the northern dark sword, stood up, and walked out of the demon treasury step by step. Chapter 1186. At the bottom of the South Sea, Tao Jinhong and the others saw that Bai Bai had the extremely powerful star sand in his hand and knew that it would be difficult to defeat him, so they could only retreat back into the formation plate. However, at this moment, half of Li Xiaomi's body was glowing. As it glowed, one could see wisps of spiritual energy drifting out from it as if it was disintegrating bit by bit. It was caused by the Li Xiaomi's star sand. Since Taoist Bai Bai had never used the Li Xiaomi's star sand before, he knew that it was extremely powerful. He was afraid that if he was unlucky, he would also fall into it, so he didn't dare to use it freely. Otherwise, no matter how powerful the three of them were, they would have already turned into nothingness under the sand. But even so, as long as a little bit of it touched his body, it would continuously melt the essence of his Dharma body. In the end, it would still be difficult for him to escape death. Li Xiaomi knew that in at most 10 breaths of time, he would lose his life, so he bowed and said, "After I leave, I'll have to trouble fellow Taoist Tao to hand over the corporeal body I left in the small world to my disciples. If possible, I hope fellow Taoist Tao can take care of my disciples in the future." Tao Jinhong solemnly bowed back and said, "If I can survive this battle, I'll definitely take care of your disciples." If he didn't notice something wrong in time just now and had the protection of the Chua dragon, he would have ended up the same way. Mi Zhenren raised her hand to take a look. On her fingertip, there was also a little starlight. It looked like it was just a little bit, but once the star sand touched her body, it invaded her body and couldn't be expelled anymore. Right now, it was slowly eroding her mana essence. She covered it with her sleeve and shouted, "If I die, then I die. What's there to be afraid of?" Li Xiaomi laughed at himself and said, "Although I've thought that this day would come and I've already seen through it, but when it really comes, there are still some worries that I can't let go." As he spoke, the light gradually spread to his cheeks, and half of his body was gone. He showed a look of pity and said, "It's a pity that I can't see the scenery of the world beyond heaven." Tao Jinren said, "If we win this battle, fellow Taoist Li will be able to see it." Because they knew that this battle was going to be extremely dangerous, the three of them had already left their soul fragments outside and kept them in an appropriate place. If the Qinsong school won, then they could reincarnate as humans, and there would be people coming to receive them in the future. Naturally, everything would be over. Li Xiaomi smiled and said, "I was originally a living creature in the wilderness." The stone man understood the mystery and discerned the emotions. "My body dispersed and my heart was not at rest. My lineage will be passed down for 10,000 years." He finished his sentence. His entire body had already dispersed amidst the fluorescence, turning into a ball of stardust and finally disappearing without a trace. Perfected Tao sighed and bowed to the other meditation cushions that they were sitting on. At this moment, Mi Zhenren's arms were already glowing faintly. Even her clothes couldn't hide it. She suddenly stood up and walked out. "Where is Mi Zhenren going?" Tao Zhenren asked in a deep voice. Mi Zhenren replied, "Rather than sitting here and waiting for death, it's better to go out and fight with that person. It'll also let him know that our Chongyu temple isn't without people." Tao Zhenren sighed. He didn't say anything to dissuade her. Mi Zhenren stopped and threw out a light. When it landed on the ground, it turned into a jade drum. She said, "This is a treasure that I used to create my heavenly abode. It's useless to keep it with me now. If you can use it, then keep it. If you can't, then throw it away." After saying that, without waiting for Tao Zhenren to reply, She leapt out of the formation plate in a streak of white light. Taoist Master Bai Bai was sitting on a cloud raft, adjusting his qi. Just now, he didn't follow up with another attack. First, he was afraid that the three of them would risk their lives to counterattack. Second, he didn't think that releasing the flying star sand would cost him a lot of mana. He's someone who wouldn't act rashly if he wasn't sure. So he'd rather wait and recover his mana before making a move. Fortunately, before coming to the Southern Sea, he obtained a few precious pills from the sect. He estimated that he'd be able to recover his mana in a few hours. In fact, he didn't care about Tao Jinhong and the other two anymore. He was sure that just now, at least two of them were affected by the flying star sand. As long as the sand touched their bodies, no matter what technique they used, they wouldn't be able to save their lives. Moreover, the more they used their mana, the faster they died. As for the last person, even if he didn't purposely deal with him, he wouldn't be able to cause much trouble. Not long after, his expression changed. He stood up and saw a white-clothed woman walking over on the waves. Glancing over, he saw that one of her arms was glowing. She snorted and said, "Mi Jinren, if you were inside the formation plate, you'd be able to live for another 2 hours. But if you use your mana now, you'll only be able to live for half a minute." Mi Jinren revealed a disdainful expression and said, "My life and death are not up to you to decide." As she spoke, a layer of colorless flame floated around her body, as if her whole body was burning. This was the most powerful divine art of the Chongyue True Temple. It was called Micro-Universal Slash. This technique required one to sacrifice one's spirit, qi, and spirit to transform into a pair of yin and yang blades. As long as the blade rays didn't dissipate, even if one hid in a small world, they would still be able to slash. This was equivalent to ending one's life prematurely. Even if the flying star sand touched one's body, it wouldn't have any effect. Spiritual Master Bai Bai didn't think much of it at first, but as the aura became more and more intense, his expression became more serious. He raised the jade scepter in his hand slightly. He could see that the other party had used her divine art the moment she came out of the formation plate. At this moment, even if he tried to stop her, he wouldn't be able to do it. Once Shinrenmi's energy was ready, his body suddenly dispersed. He turned into a blade light that was as bright as the sun, and he charged forward. Spiritual Master Bai 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 didn't want to risk his life against a person who was going to die, so he used his mana and escaped into his own cave, hoping to avoid it. However, the next moment, he saw that the blade ray actually pierced through the world, as if it had the power to slash this cave. He couldn't help but be shocked. He wanted to throw the jade scepter in his hand up, then he didn't even look at the result and escaped again. With a loud bang, he escaped from the void. After a while, he didn't see the blade ray chasing after him. However, he sensed that it was contained and not spat out, as if it could slash out from the void at any time. Spiritual Master Bai Bai Bai's expression changed slightly. How could he not know that he had fallen into a trap? Mi Jinren purposely left the blade ray in his cave as a deterrent. As long as the blade ray didn't leave, the next time he entered the cave, he would definitely be slashed by the blade. Just thinking about it made him very sad. However, at this moment he suddenly felt like something was wrong. He focused his energy and turned his head to the north. He saw an indistinct black saber energy heading towards the southern cliff. This was because Mi Jinren knew that he might not be able to kill his opponent even if he used both blades together. Thus, he purposely split the two blades. The yang blade chased after the opponent while the yin blade slashed towards the southern cliff continent. Spiritual Master Bai 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 snorted and said, "What a good plan. If I am even slightly careless, you will ruin the continent." To guard against the yang blade that could slash out at any time, he didn't dare to use his divine art. He only threw out a golden plate the size of a palm. After the treasure landed on his feet, it shone up and wrapped around his body. In a blink of an eye, he had already escaped into the void. In just a few breaths, he was in front of the blade ray. However, at this point, he was also forced to not block it. Otherwise, the southern cliff continent would definitely be destroyed. He made a hand sign and a clear light surged behind him. He took the initiative to go up. However, Right at this moment, 8 white flood dragons flew out of nowhere. They weaved through the air and collided with the clear light ahead of time. Immediately, the two melted away and disappeared. Tao Zhenhong, spiritual master Bai frowned. However, the black blade ray had already arrived. He had no time to be distracted. He shook his wrist and cut off all 5 of his fingers. They turned into 5 rays of starlight and collided with the blade ray. After 4 rays of starlight were destroyed, the blade ray finally turned and disappeared. The last ray of starlight landed and returned to its original position. Looking at his palm again, there was only a thumb left. The physical body of a cultivator from the celestial sect of wonders was very important. Now that he had given up 4 fingers, it meant that there was no way for him to take another step forward. Even if he didn't think about it, he still felt inexplicably annoyed. Raising his head, he saw Tao Zhenren sitting on the azure phoenix, floating in the sky. Letting out a cold laugh, he said, "Tao Zhenren, originally, I wouldn't have come looking for you if you were hiding in the array. But since you can't wait to die, I can grant you your wish." Just as he was about to step forward to find trouble with Tao Zhenren, his body trembled and he looked behind him. The seawater split apart, and a young Taoist dressed in a black robe emerged, his sleeves fluttering in the wind. He held a sword in his hand and stepped out on his chi. Taoist Master Bai immediately lost his calm demeanor, and a trace of fear appeared in his eyes. He said in horror, "Zhang Yan?" He had seen how Zhang Yan killed Chu Rui. After Chu Rui was forced away by the tribulation fire, he was glad that he didn't have to face such a great enemy. But now that this person appeared in front of him, how could he not panic? He suddenly shouted, and without caring about anything else, he gathered all the mana in his body and shot rays of clear jade light over. Zhang Yan's eyes were slightly red and purple. He took a slight breath and then blew out a breath. This breath rushed out like a tsunami, and everywhere it passed, the clear lights in the sky were all shattered. Taoist Master Bai was shocked. This was the purest collision of mana. His opponent's cultivation was far better than his, so no matter what kind of technique he used, it would be useless. He was also decisive. He immediately took out the bright star constant stabilization technique, and spots of starlight sprinkled down, covering his body. Just now he was holding this technique, but there was a ray of sword light that came through the sky, slashing right on the starlight. In an instant, it was shattered, and it couldn't stop it at all. Seeing that the sword light was about to take the opportunity to cut him in half, suddenly a vast and imposing spiritual light descended, wrapping around him, and in an instant he disappeared without a trace. Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows, and put away the North Dark Sword. At this time, Tao Zhenren came over and said, "Taoist Master Zhang, just now, that aura isn't something we can do. Was it Master Lingya who made a move?" Zhang Yan looked in the direction of Southern Cliffs continent, and sneered, "This was what Master Lingya told us. With him in Southern Cliffs continent, no matter how hard we try, it's useless." Tao Zhenren thought for a moment, and said, "Taoist Master Zhang, do you think that Southern Cliffs continent still wants to fight?" Zhang Yan laughed lightly and said, "Why not? With this person in Southern Cliffs continent, does it mean that there's no one behind us? If he comes out, there will naturally be 2 sect masters to receive him. There's no need to care at all." Chapter 1187. Zhang Yan was able to know a lot of secrets when he was in the position of Hall Master Du Zhen in Qinsong School. The world was different now. When one's cultivation reached the level of the heads of several sects, one must not act rashly. If Clear Purple's spiritual opportunity was exhausted, or if he used too much of his mana, then his great ascension would be delayed, and he could only stay in this place. According to what he knew, even if there was still Clear Purple's spiritual opportunity in this world, there was not much left. If Master Lingya had the confidence to defeat the accumulation of Qinsong and Shaoqing sects, he could have made a move right away and forced the heads of the 2 sects to come out and fight with him. When Clear Purple's spiritual opportunity was exhausted, he would win even if he could not win. Just now, at this critical moment, it would be best for Master Lingya to take him down. However, he did not do so. Instead, he saved Zhou Liguang. It was obvious that he did not want to have a direct conflict with the heads of the two sections. It was also because he saw through this that he dared to attack the South Cliff continent. From this aspect, the technique of moving the wings to victory just happened to be able to obtain the greatest results with the smallest price. Because in this way, the masters of both sides didn't have to personally enter the battlefield to fight, and only the disciples of their sects could decide the outcome of the battle. Tao Jinren sighed, I didn't expect that Zhou Liguang would still escape. It's a pity for the two Taoists. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered and he said, Taoist friend, please wait here for a moment. I'll go and settle this score. He sensed that the tribulation fire was getting closer. There was only half an hour left for him. However, it was enough to destroy the continent. If Master Lingye did not send someone to stop it, then he could only watch the continent being destroyed. Unless he really took action to protect it personally. However, if he really did that, it would definitely exhaust his spiritual opportunity. Qinsong's side would gain more than destroying the continent. Zhang Yan once thought that if Master Lingye gave up on ascension, then he might be able to drag everyone down with him. However, he believed that sect Master Qin should have considered this before, so he did not think too much about it. Thus, he took a step forward and spread out his dharma. Boom! A vast and mighty profound qi was immediately unleashed. After tumbling for a while, it brought with it the momentum of a torrent as it rolled towards the north. Looking at the situation, if no one went forward to stop them, they would not be able to escape. It would definitely be able to smash the Southern Cliffs continent into pieces. At this time, in the Jade Heaven sect, a spiritual light flashed on a certain peak. Taoist Master Bai Pai appeared from within and went outside. He then knelt on the ground and said, Disciple thanks Venerable Master for saving my life. Although he was in a sorry state this time, he still managed to escape with his life. He still had lingering fear in his heart. It was just that when he bowed down, he heard the voice beside his ear and immediately revealed a look of respect. After a long time, he bowed a few more times and said, This disciple understands and will not disappoint the sect's trust. After the sound faded away, his expression was a bit unsightly, and he couldn't help but sigh as he descended the mountain and returned to his cave. At this time, he suddenly remembered that there was still a blade glow in his grotto heaven that he had not gotten rid of. He couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. However, it wasn't that easy to get rid of it. Moreover, he didn't have the time right now, so he could only put it aside. He swallowed a few pills and adjusted his breathing. He found one of his trusted disciples and gave him a few words of advice. The disciple bowed and left after receiving the order. He then turned to the boy beside him and said, Quickly bring Peak Leader Gui Ming and Hall Leader Xen Ming here. Not long later, Zhou Ruiying and Wu Yunbi arrived at the hall. After the greetings, Taoist Master Bai Bai invited the two of them to sit down and said solemnly, You should also know that Zhang Yan is heading towards the Southern Cliffs continent. This place is the foundation of our Yuxiao cultivation. We must try to stop him. Wu Yunbi said solemnly, It's not that I want to boost his morale, but I'm afraid that the three of us are not his match. In order to protect the sect, I have nothing to fear, but I'm afraid that even if I give up my life, it will still be difficult to protect the Southern Cliffs continent. He could clearly see that even Yuan Yang sect Master Chu Rui, a third-stage cultivator who had cultivated Yuan embryo, died in the hands of Zhang Yan, so he didn't think that he could win against such a person. Taoist Master Bai 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 did not deny it, and said, It's extremely difficult to win against him, but it's not impossible to just delay him. Delay? Wu Yunbi was startled, but he immediately reacted, Could it be that the sect has other reinforcements? Taoist Master Bai 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 shook his head and said, Now that senior brother Kong Zheng and the other sect's Taoists have been intercepted by the Qinsong school at the north of River Cheng, they can't come back for the time being. As for the sects, only one person is left to guard the sect. Even if they can be mobilized, they won't be able to rush over in a short period of time. We can only rely on ourselves. Wu Yunbi thought for a moment and asked, How long will it take? Enlightened being Bai Bai cupped his fist and replied, Just now, Venerable Meng has informed me that Zhang Yan has yet to shake off the stellar stone tribulation fire. I don't know what technique he used to conceal it, but he has temporarily left it behind. From the looks of it now, the fire will arrive at most 3 minutes, and he will definitely retreat by then. Wu Yunbi's eyes lit up. So you're saying that we only need to delay this person for 3/4 of an hour? He slowly nodded. That's worth a try, but there's a problem. Reverend Bai Ren said, What trouble? Wu Yunbi said, Hall Master Xen Ming and I have fought with Zhang Yan in the northern underworld continent. This person is indeed powerful and mysterious. Previously, no matter how the 4 of us attacked, we couldn't break the protective spell around him. If he ignored us and attacked the South Cliff continent, how can we stop him? Taoist Master Bai Ji said, It's all right. He waved his hand outside, and a disciple who was waiting outside the door came in. He placed a jade bucket with a full belly and a thin neck on the table. He pointed at it and said, This is the divine firmament's 1,000 luminary flying star sand. It's enough to fight against Zhang Yanfeng. However, this sand is too powerful and consumes a lot of energy. Be careful when you use it. We don't expect to kill him this time, just force him to retreat. Wu Yunbi was slightly surprised, and at the same time, his spirit was slightly lifted. He said, With this, we can really fight against that Zhang Yan. Unfortunately, it's too rare. Reverend Bai Ren said, This sand is too difficult to refine. Other than the ones that were taken by Hall Master Kongjing, the rest are all here. He looked outside and his expression darkened. He stood up and said, This person is getting closer and closer to the South Cliff continent. We can't delay any longer. Quickly keep it and follow me. Without waiting for the 2 to agree, he took out a talisman and shook it. Scattered golden lights fell down and wrapped the 3 of them. They flew out of the mountain gate with the speed of a meteor. In just half a minute, they arrived at the South Cliff continent. At this moment, it was impossible to see any seawater within an area of a few tens of thousands of kilometers above the surface of the heavenly South Sea. It was already enveloped by the vast and boundless profound energy, and it seemed as if everything outside of this body had become chaotic. This kind of pressure that seemed to shake the heaven and earth was not something that a normal grotto heaven cultivator could do. The 3 of them just stood in front of him and felt that the chi dynamic was not smooth. Reverend Bai Ren pretended to be excited and said, This person dared to use his dharma, I can use the stardust to attack him. He turned his head and said, The 2 of you stay behind and cover for me. Wu Yunbi and Zhou Ruing quickly agreed. Enlightened Master Bai immediately tapped his feet, and a bright starlight appeared below him, slowly rising into the air. It was night time, and from the ground, it was as if a brilliant golden smoke was rising into the sky. It was abnormally gorgeous. Wu Yunbi and Zhou Ruing also followed. They stood on the left and right, but their positions were quite far apart. This way, if the situation was smooth, they could move forward to outflank Reverend Bai Ren. If Reverend Bai Ren could not hold on, they could help in time. Zhang Yan stood on the Xian Qi Sea with his sleeves behind his back. He could clearly see the situation in front of him. Seeing that Zhou Liguang came out to stop him as he expected, he sneered and shook his sleeves to cast a high sky thundershock technique. In an instant, the surrounding 10,000 miles was filled with lightning. Streaks of lightning jumped out from the void and flew everywhere. No one knew where they would land in the next moment. Wu Yunbi and Zhou Ruing were prepared to help, but when they saw the situation, they realized that unless they used their dharma and charged over, they would not be able to get close. The 2 of them also knew that it was a bad idea. They communicated with each other through telepathy and decided not to go forward for now. They would wait and see what would happen. Reverend Bai Ren quickly took out a 4-cornered bronze pavilion. He stood in it and a bright golden light rose from his feet. No matter how the lightning struck, it could not break through. He took a look. Both sides were still far away and it was not suitable for him to take out the stardust. He thought for a while and decided to wait until he was closer. Thus, he took out a bronze pendant from his sleeve and threw it into the sky. There was a rustling sound and a white mist spurted out from it. The mist rumbled and seemed to be boiling. This was known as the chi of confusion. As long as it could be mixed into a cultivator's chi machine, it could be integrated into one slowly. Even the spirit could be dissolved. He did not expect this qi to be able to stop Zhang Yan. He only wanted to use it to confuse the spiritual vigor so that it would be easier for him to use the stardust later. Zhang Yan raised his hand and pressed down lightly. A strong gust of wind blew past. However, the white fog did not dissipate. Instead, it grew thicker and thicker. It covered the air densely and was even corroding the spiritual vigor in the surroundings. He scoffed coldly and took out the dragon's soul essence from his sleeve. He released a lot of abyssal heavy water and made a gesture. Instantly, countless abyssal heavy water droplets appeared around him. Soon, the qi was filled with these droplets and they rolled forward under the control of the dragon's soul essence. Reverend Byron took a few glances and said to himself, "Abyssal heavy water?" Ever since Zhang Yan entered the grotto heaven, he had fought with others several times. Naturally, his techniques were known by others. This time, there was indeed a lot of abyssal heavy water in the surroundings. That was why he made such a judgment. Reverend Byron pondered and thought that Zhang Yan was using this to stop Wu Yunbi and Zhou Ruiying from getting close to him so that he could isolate himself in it. He was not afraid. He had the stardust in his hand. As long as he threw it out, the other party would have to focus on defending and would not have time to care about anything else. By then, it would be up to him whether to retreat or advance. As he was thinking, he saw that the qi was gradually pressing towards him. He did not hesitate anymore. He waved his sleeve and released the qi of separation in his hand. To be continued. Chapter 1188. The Shaoqing sect leader, Yu Xianxiao, stood in the pure grace palace. Although the illusions of the devil's doctrine were constantly attacking the sect's formation, he didn't seem to hear it. He just looked in the direction of the South Cliffs continent. Currently, the leaders of the Qinsong, Shaoqing, Yuxiao, and Nether Spring sects were restraining each other. They seemed calm on the surface, but no one would act rashly. If one of them showed a flaw, it was very likely that others would attack. In order to avoid giving their opponents a chance, they just sat and watched the cultivators from their sects fight. At the moment, Zhang Yan was attacking in the direction of the South Cliffs continent. This was the most important place of Yuxiao, where the spiritual cave was located. If it was destroyed, it would undoubtedly be a heavy blow to Yuxiao, and it might even shake people's hearts. Yu Xianxiao judged that if Master Lingya wanted to protect this place, there were only 3 ways. The first was to attack Zhang Yan, but he and sect leader Qin wouldn't just stand by. Even if the Nether Spring sect leader Liang Xuanyi tried to stop them, he could only block one person at most, and the other person could handle it. The second was to protect with his own magic power, but this wasn't the best plan. The 2 of them could also attack and disturb him. And the safest way was to move Yuya to protect the South Cliffs continent. Back then, immortal Yao Han could use this treasure to protect the 4 continents, but now Master Lingya didn't have this ability. It might be easy to protect the East Flower continent, but it would be a bit difficult to protect 2 continents. If he really did that, he would be giving the 2 sects a chance. Yu Xuanxiao's gaze turned around and shot a glance towards his left. There was a completely flawless hiltless sword that seemed as if it was constructed from clear light lying horizontally there. However, if he closed his eyes, then he was unable to determine its length, nor was he able to draw out its appearance within his consciousness. This was the Shaoqing sect's treasure, the Taizhua Xianqing sword. As long as Master Lingya showed a trace of intention to protect the South Cliffs continent, he would definitely slash it without hesitation. At the same time, above the South Sea, after Taoist Bai Bai threw out the Hanli divine sand, everything within his sight turned into a dazzling radiance. It was as if a galaxy was unfolding in front of him. Zhang Yan had already seen the power of the divine sand earlier. As long as he did not touch his body, he could not stop his spiritual vigor from dissipating. His life would be in danger. He estimated that even with his rank 5 strength path body, he might not be able to block it. If he used the mysterious rotating heavenly net wall, he might be able to block it, but it was only a possibility. He would not take this risk. Thus, he flicked his sleeve and tossed out the all-heavens combination divine water forbidden light. In an instant, a bright stream of water seemed to flow out of nothingness, emitting a gurgling sound. It stretched out in midair and collided head-on with the starlight. Han Li's spirit was seizing the spiritual vigor while the forbidden light of the holy water was endless. For a moment, both sides were wearing each other down and neither side could suppress the other. However, these two items relied on the user's magic power to activate, and Taoist Bai Pai was at a disadvantage in this aspect. In just a few breaths, he felt that his magic power was running out. Wu Yunbi and Zhou Ruing saw that it would be difficult for him to defend alone, so they quickly released their Hanli divine sand from their left and right sides to support him. Zhang Yan flicked his sleeve calmly, and a forbidden light of the holy water gushed out from both sides, blocking the enemy. Wu Yunbi and Zhou Ruing followed Taoist Bai Pai's instructions and did not dare to casually scatter the sand, they only released it bit by bit. But even so, they could only hold on for a while and felt that they could not hold on any longer. Seeing that the forbidden light of the holy water was still in front of them, and did not seem to be worn down much, the two felt helpless. Hanli divine sand could not do anything. Even if they used their remaining methods, they still could not do anything to Zhang Yan. After a while, Taoist Bai Pai used up all the divine sand in his hand. Seeing that he still could not stop Zhang Yan, he took a deep breath and used another technique. The bronze pavilion beneath him suddenly shone with golden light, and murmurs could be heard. As the base of Yuxiao School, Southern Cliffs continent also set up a forbidden formation after it was invaded by outsiders once. However, it was obviously impossible to protect such a large continent. Even if one really exhausted the spiritual vigor of a continent, it would not be enough. They could only set up a defensive formation under some beautiful mountains and rivers, and this bronze pavilion was formed by the chi of Southern Cliffs continent's forbidden formation. These spiritual vigor were gathered from the thousands of mountains and rivers in the continent. If one did not care about it, it could even block a full blow from a third-degree cultivator. Initially, he had expected that as long as Zhang Yan's forward momentum was blocked, it would not be easy for him to recover. But he did not expect that the surging Xian Qi contained a lot of abyssal heavy water. With such a large amount of water, even the sky demon would not dare to block it, not to mention this forbidden formation. Zhang Yan saw that he had swept all the Hanli divine sand, and with a roll of his sleeve, he kept the remaining forbidden light of the holy water. He only needed to deal with a second-degree cultivator, so he did not need this item. At this moment, there was no threat in front of him. Under the activation of his Fa Li, the speed of his Xian Xiang's charge was a little faster. Seeing this, Taoist Master Bai Pai didn't dare to be careless. He swallowed a few medicinal pills, gritted his teeth, and channeled his spiritual power. He watched helplessly as the Xian Qi surged towards him. An explosion suddenly resounded in the sky, and the bronze pavilion collapsed. A ray of light flew out from the broken light. After Bai Bai suffered a loss earlier, he was always on guard. Just now, seeing that the situation was not right, he cast a ray of light and retreated. He didn't suffer any injuries, just a little embarrassed. But even though he managed to dodge it this time, he was still unable to stop his opponent, so he couldn't escape just like that. Once he was far away, he made another hand seal to summon the spiritual energy from all directions. Then he gathered the tong stop again. However, he could sense that more than 60% of the mountain and water array chi was broken. His heart sank. But at this point, he didn't have any better countermeasures. He could only take it one step at a time. A few breaths later, the bronze pavilion cracked again. Taoist Bai Bai escaped once again and retreated to a distance. He tried to gather the formation chi again, but he realized that he couldn't even move a strand of it. It was obvious that it had collapsed. At this time, he had no other choice but to face the attack personally. He could only shake his body and reveal his Dharma form. In the sky, a ball of dazzling light surged out. Its aura reflected the mountains and rivers, and the starlight illuminated the heavens. There were multicolored clouds flying outside, covering a radius of thousands of miles. Its momentum was not weak. Zhang Yan glanced at the starlight chi river in front of him, and his eyes flashed. His body leaned forward slightly, the black robe on his body suddenly fluttered, and the surrounding profound chi seemed to be pushed, rumbling as it surged forward. Rumble! Taoist Master Bai Bai's starlight avatar was shattered by the impact, turning into countless specks of starlight and retreating. However, he was quite resilient. Even though he knew that he couldn't win, he still refused to give up. After a few breaths, when the spiritual vigor gathered and condensed, he faced it again, but it was shattered without any suspense. This happened again and again. His Dharma form had dimmed, and the spiritual vigor was gradually declining. At this time, if he turned around and fled, there was actually a chance of survival. But he also knew that if he risked his life to stop the attack today, there might be a chance for him to reincarnate in the future. He could still return to the clan and not lose his identity as an upper-level cultivator. But if he did not care and retreated, the rules of the clan would definitely not let him off easily. So he forcibly gathered his mana and blocked the attack halfway. This time, Zhang Yan didn't even look at it. He activated his Xian Qi and it surged like the sea, crushing over the Dharma form. The specks of starlight were instantly submerged in the boundless mist. At this time, a golden light flew up from the inside. It was Taoist Bai Bai who used the jade pendant to protect his spirit and escaped towards the direction of the mountain gate. When Zhang Yan saw this, he was just about to use the high-altitude thunder shock when he seemed to sense something. He looked up and saw a sharp blade flying out from the void, slashing right on the wisp of divine soul. It instantly shattered like glass. After the saber light killed the Bai divine soul, it seemed to have exhausted itself. Its brilliance gradually dimmed and finally dissipated in the atmosphere. Wu Yunbi and Zhou Ruing were shocked when they saw this scene from afar. Ever since Wu Riang's death, Zhou Liguang's skills were second only to Hall Master Kang Zheng's. The rest of the Xinjiang could not compare. Who would have thought that today, not only would he be defeated here, his soul would be scattered and scattered. The impact on them could not be said to be small. Zhou Ruing gritted his teeth and said, "Since Reverend Bai has died in battle, the two of us cannot retreat." Wu Yunbi frowned and sent a voice transmission. "Junior Sister Zhou, don't be impatient. We've already done our best this time. It'll be useless even if we go forward to stop him, and we'll even lose our lives for nothing. It's better to leave a useful body." However, Zhou Ruing interrupted him and said, "I, Zhou Ruing, am a member of the Zhou clan. Now that outsiders want to destroy the foundation of my clan, how can I turn a blind eye? Peak Lord, there's no need to say anything more. Even if I have to die here, I'll go up and stop him." Wu Yunbi sighed. If the two of them went back together, even if there was a crime, they would have to share the responsibility. However, since Zhou Ruing did not want to retreat, even if he retreated alone, the sect rules would not allow him to do so. He stretched out his hand and touched the talisman in his sleeve. This was given by the sect before he left. Every grotto heaven in the sect had one, but he could not use it himself. It could only be activated when Venerable Lingya summoned it. Just now, Reverend Bai was brought back to the mountain by this talisman. He thought, if the two of us die, there will be no one guarding the Yuxiao clan. Venerable Lingya may not see such a situation, so why don't we fight it out? Thus, he sent a voice transmission. "Since Hall Master Exenming insists on this, I'll go with you." Once he made up his mind, he no longer hesitated. He activated his Dharma form and charged towards the surging mystical qi. Zhang Yan took a glance but did not stop moving forward. He calmly held onto the dragon's soul and channeled his mana to control the heavy abyssal water. It turned into droplets of water that hung on both sides, waiting for the two of them to come up. However, before the two of them could reach the front, a ray of spiritual light flashed in the air and took the two of them away. Zhang Yan scoffed coldly. He wasn't surprised by this. However, at this moment, there was no one obstructing his path, and the path ahead was smooth. He wanted to see how Lingya would choose. Would he exhaust his strength to protect the southern cliff continent, or would he directly attack him? As he thought about this, he sped up a little. After about a minute, he saw that the southern cliff's continent was close at hand. He let out a clear shout and gathered all the mana in his body. He rolled up the mystical tide that seemed to cover the heaven and earth. With the sound of endless wind and thunder, he crashed into it. Chapter 1189. Just as Zhang Yan's Dharma power was about to crash into it, a beam of spiritual light suddenly shot out from the Donghua continent. Then, it spread out and shot out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it covered the entire South Cliffs continent. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed. He immediately realized that Master Lingya had made a move. He had abandoned Donghua and moved the Jade Cliff to cover the Dingzhou continent. With a quick thought in his heart, since it was like this, then it would be meaningless for him to continue charging forward. With a command of his divine insight, all the roiling profound energy in his surroundings actually vanished layer by layer, and it actually instantly restrained this vast and mighty force into nothingness. Almost at the same time, in the Shaoqing sect's pure grace palace, a sharp light appeared in Yu Xuanxiao's eyes. His body turned into a clear light and rose up. The Taizhua sword on the table also flew up at the same time. The two merged in midair. In an instant, rays of sword light that filled the sky shot out from the Sun Traverser Mountain, crossed the sky, and slashed down on the Donghua continent. At this moment, the Donghua continent had no shelter. If this sword landed, the entire continent would definitely be destroyed. Once the various sects of Donghua lost this place to rely on, this battle would come to an end. However, at this moment, a large tree that supported the heavens and the earth emerged from the continent. There were 3 large leaves on it, shining with endless green light. Qi rose up and actually blocked the sword, preventing it from falling on the central continent. Yu Xianxiao raised his eyebrows. It was not difficult to recognize that this must be a trick of the Taihao school. At this moment, the tribulation fire in the South Cliffs continent jumped and actually reflected into his mind. Previously, he had cut off nearly half of the tribulation fire. Although he had suppressed it, it had not been completely dissolved. Now that it had increased a little, even if it was only a wisp, it could no longer be alleviated. It suddenly exploded and began to burn his Dharma power. This time, he seemed to have fallen into Master Lingya's trap. Not only did he not gain any advantage, but he also fell into it himself. However, in the face of such a situation, he only smiled lightly. The next moment, he was still standing in the Pure Grace Palace, and the Taizhua sword was still there. It was as if just now, everything was just an illusion. Nothing had happened. The Taizhua Xianqing sword was not an ordinary killing sword. It contained a strand of divine will left behind by Ancestor Hongba. When the sword was unsheathed, it could reflect the future for an instant. Therefore, unless the sword was not unsheathed, it could not be used. Every strike would hit its target. He looked in the direction of the Donghua continent and said to himself, "It's not time yet." 30,000 feet underground, the Nether Spring sect master Liang Xuanyi was submerged in the yellow smoke. He saw that Yuya's spiritual light had turned to protect the Southern Cliffs continent. He had already made a hand seal and was about to attack. However, to his surprise, the Qinsong and Shaoqing sects did not move and did not show any signs of attacking. He thought for a moment. He retracted his movements. Outside the Southern Cliff continent, after Zhang Yan retracted his mana, he looked back and saw that the tribulation fire behind him had already caught up and was not far from him. He decided not to stay here any longer and sent a voice transmission to Tao Zhenren. "Fellow Taoists, please take care of their souls. If you win this battle, if you are willing, you can enter my Qinsong sect to cultivate in your next life." After giving his instructions, he dove into the sea and hid in the demon treasury again. Tao Zhenren saw him leave and bowed, then turned and flew away. He returned to the array disk and sat down. Even if Master Lingya withdrew Yuya, as long as he did not leave, then he would still be a deterrent. Just now, when they came out, there were 3 of them, but now he was alone. Looking at the 2 empty cushions beside him, he could not help but sigh. At the same time, in another place, Zhenren Kongjing saw that the Southern Cliff continent was finally safe and heaved a sigh of relief. He turned to look at the huge tree that was rising from the Donghua continent, then turned around and bowed to Shang Shuding, who was sitting not far away. He said pleasantly, "Sect Master Shang, before that Yuya retreats, the safety of the Donghua continent will depend on your sect." Shang Shuding said, "What are you talking about, Taoist Kongjing? Since our Taihao school is an ally of your sect, it is only right for us to help." This huge tree was one of the 3 divine trees in his sect, the Great Pan Tree. It was left behind by the founding master of his Taihao school. There was a technique in it that was connected to the Hanshio True shifting Great Void Defense Formation. When it was activated, it could uproot the earth and connect the sky, connect the spiritual vigor of the 4 directions, and protect the land, mountains, and rivers. Jinren Kongjing nodded and smiled, but then he frowned. He realized that the fate energy on his side had weakened a lot. Just now, they could only deal with the attacks and could not fight back. Moreover, Jinren Bai was killed. With this series of events, people's hearts were wavering. He thought about it and felt that in such a situation, he had to change his original plan of not doing anything. Thus, he looked at the crowd and said, "Since we are here, we should not do nothing. No matter what, we should first think of a way to destroy the formation of Qinsong School's mountain gate." Tan Dingxian was overjoyed when he heard this. He immediately stood up from his seat, cupped his fist, and said, "Fellow Taoist Kongjing, please wait for a moment. I'll go unfold the formation, and then all of you can start working together." It was not an easy task to attack the mountain gate of Qinsong School. They had to guard against the cultivators of Qinsong School who could attack from the inside. Once the square formation map was opened, both sides would have the protection of the mountain guarding formation, which could reduce the opponent's advantage to the minimum. Jinren Kongjing bowed back and said, "Thank you, sect leader Tan." Tan Dingxian ordered Bu Jingsu to stay behind to entertain the guests. He himself retreated from the high pavilion and went to the top of the formation door. With a point of his finger, an auspicious cloud flew over. He sat cross-legged and took out a bronze bell. He shook it lightly and immediately hundreds of rays of light flew over. When they arrived in front of him, they all turned into talismans and hovered in the air. He took out a meter-long jade mallet from his sleeve and knocked on a few of the talismans. Following his action, the square formation map below him suddenly emitted an infinite amount of auspicious light. The misty clouds stretched for hundreds of thousands of miles and slowly pressed towards the great pool of Dragon Lake with a force that could overturn the sky and overturn the sun. Jinren Kongjing stood up and walked to the balcony in front of the pavilion. When the Zhen people saw him like this, they also stood up and walked out together. Reverend Kongjing looked at the muddy great swamp below, then he looked at the cloud of mist in the sky that did not disperse for 10,000 years. He pointed with his finger and said, "Today I uphold the righteous path, come with great momentum, shall overturn the foundation of 10,000 years." When the Zhen people heard this, they all chimed in. Jinren Kongjing was the first to swing his arm and cast a dazzling starlight towards the mountain gate formation of Qinsong School. When he made his move, the Zhen people behind him responded. They all took out their talismans and struck downwards. This move was not to break the formation, but to prevent the people of Qinsong School from obstructing them. They were trying their best to cover for them. For a moment, in the night sky, more than 10 rays of rainbow light that were as bright as stars could be seen. They drew lines of starlight in the sky and attacked from tens of thousands of miles away. When Sect Master Qin saw that Yu Xiao's attack was not small, he said, "Yuntian, go and cast the profound formation passed down by the founding master." Qi Yuntian bowed his head and left. Taoist Master Meng also stood up, bowed, and said, "Master, since Yu Xiao is already attacked, disciple should go to the corner of the formation with the other Taoists." Sect Master Qin waved his horsetail whisk and nodded. "Go." The 4 Zhen people, Meng, Shen, Mu, and Sun, stood up at the same time. After bowing to Sect Master Qin, they went to their respective corners. At this time, a rumbling sound suddenly came from outside and traveled to the inside. The attacking talisman had already hit the mountain gate formation. Sect Master Qin's expression was normal. He looked down and picked up a talisman from the table. With a sweep of his horsetail whisk, he opened the restriction and threw it out. In an instant, a dark light flew out of the mountain gate. However, it did not get entangled with the outside talismans. Instead, it passed through the Sky River and flew into the Donghua continent, heading straight for the huge pan tree. Shang Shuding was startled at first, then he laughed. Attacking the pan tree was indeed the best plan. This tree was not that simple. It could be said that it had existed since the beginning of the West Continent's Xian path. Back then, the founding master was able to ascend with the help of this tree. It could be said that it was extraordinarily tough. Even the mountain gate formation of Taihao School relied on this tree to suppress it. It would not be easy to break it. Qinsong School had chosen the wrong target to find trouble with this tree. However, in the next moment, when he saw what was flying, his expression changed drastically. He saw a demon insect with 6 eyes and a body several miles long biting the tree trunk. The sound of its jaws chewing was like metal scraping against metal. It was extremely ear-piercing. Shang shooting carefully sensed the vital energy on the demonic insect, and he felt it was ruthless, violent, and revealed a savage and vicious aura, and he couldn't help but cry out involuntarily. Heavenly demon? As soon as the words of the sky demon came out, everyone present was moved. Jinren Kongjing was also shocked. Even with his shrewdness, he could not remain calm at this moment. Qinsong School's Xian Shu had blocked their way back, and they could not go back to help. Yuya was not here, and they were relying on this huge pan tree to suppress the Ding continent. If this demon insect destroyed it, the consequences would be unthinkable. He did not dare to think further. He turned to look for Xiao Lingyun, pointed, and asked, "Sect Master Xiao, what kind of demon is this?" Xiao Lingyun looked at it for a moment, thought for a while, and said with difficulty, "Judging by its appearance, it might be the legendary sun-swallowing green locust." Jinren Kongjing shouted, "How is that possible? Wasn't this demon insect suppressed by the West Continent cultivators in the West Ocean's Eye?" Bu Jingsu looked up and said, "Just now, when Jinren Zhang avoided the tribulation fire, he went to the West Ocean's Eye. Is there a connection between the two?" Xiao Lingyun said, "If that's the case, I'm afraid it will be difficult to deal with." His Southern Flower sect was good at taming beasts and subduing demons, but to deal with sky demons, they were still lacking. The sun-swallowing green locust was extraordinary among the many ancient sky demons. The so-called green did not refer to its appearance, but to its noble status. To be able to be mentioned in the same breath as the demon emperor and dragon monarch, it was obvious how powerful it was. Behind them, Palace Master Su Heng took a step forward and asked, "Sect Master Shang, can that divine wood block this demon insect?" Shang shooting was silent. Just by looking at his expression, the answer was already self-evident. Before everyone could think of a countermeasure, they suddenly heard the loud sound of water outside. Turning to look, they saw a boundless tide surging in from the sky, and it was rushing towards them with the momentum of toppling mountains and overturning seas. Chapter 1190. Tan Dingxian was presiding over the array. When she saw the river approaching, she quickly raised the jade mallet and struck several talismans. The light outside the array became brighter. In a flash, the mystic water rushed down like a waterfall and collided with the golden clouds. The two sides pressed against each other, neither giving way. However, as the water on the opposite side grew stronger and surrounded the array was also forced to shrink. Soon, it was less than half of its original size. Seeing that the situation was not good, he shook the bronze bell in his hand, and bronze lamps emerged from the array. The twin flames of yin and yang floated above, and the soft water supported the mountain below, and the heart was the grass. Originally, the fire in the lamps was weak, but as he cast the spell, it gradually became stronger, as if a great help had been added to the array. The light expanded a little, and the situation was finally stabilized. Jinren Kongjing was not in the mood to care about the battle at the moment. He was only thinking about how to protect the sacred tree and the Donghua continent. Hall Master Su Heng thought for a moment, then stood up and said, "I think that the Yutsong sect used some means to borrow the body of the sun-swallowing green locust. Otherwise, even if we all attack together, it would be difficult for us to defeat this demon. Why would we need to bite the great coiled wood?" Kongjing nodded, but he also knew that even if it was only the body of the sky demon, it would not be easy to deal with, so he looked at Xiao Lingyun and said, "Sect Master Xiao, what should we use to kill this demon locust?" After careful consideration, Xiao Lingyun replied, "Don't blame us. We don't know yet. We need someone to attack one or two sides. Palace Master Su Heng suggested again, Enlightened Master, even though the floating river is difficult to cross, every sect has people guarding it. Why don't we ask them to come out and try to make a move? It would be best if we could solve it, and it would save us a lot of trouble. Zhenren Kongjing heard this. He nodded subconsciously and looked at the cultivators of the sections. Xiao Lingyun hurriedly said, I will try to send a message to the sect. The Yuan Yang sect had lost their sect master, Chu Rui, and they had yet to elect a new sect master. Everything would be decided by Zhenren Fu for now. Because this matter was related to the safety of the Donghua continent, she felt that she was duty-bound. After thinking for a while, she said to Bu Jingsu, Elder Bu, the Sky River is blocking the way. I'm afraid it would be difficult to send a letter back. Do you have a psychic jade wall so that I can inform the sect? Bu Jingsu replied, Of course there is, please follow me. Shang Shuding was more concerned about this divine tree than anyone else. He said in a low voice, I will go with you. In the Mingbai mountain of the primordial Yang sect, Qiao Jingdao had just become a grotto heaven not long ago. Like Chu Rui, he cultivated that person's technique and had great potential. They were afraid that he would die on the battlefield. Therefore, he came to the mountain to guard the gate. His temperament was calm. He knew that this was his family's responsibility, and he couldn't leave without permission. Thus, no matter how chaotic the outside world was, he didn't care and just focused on cultivating in the cave. At this moment, a boy knocked on the door and reported, Shinran, there is movement on the shadow jade wall. Qiao Jingdao acknowledged and turned to the side hall. He stood in front of a psychic jade wall and waved his sleeve. Zhenren Fu's figure appeared. Zhenren Fu told him what happened and reminded him to be careful before leaving. Qiao Jingdao pondered and said, Since it is a sky demon, its body must be tough. Only a killing weapon can subdue it. Looks like I can only go to the sword hall and ask the two Zenrens to come. When Chu Rui left this time, he brought almost all his treasures with him. But after his death, the De Yuan and Jingxin swords returned to the sect. Fortunately, this was a critical moment. After Chu Rui's death, Qiao Jingdao seemed like he was going to take over the position of the sect master. After explaining everything in detail, the two swords just now were willing to follow. He held the swords and left the sect, flying with all his might. He headed in the direction of the great immortal tree. Not long after, he arrived in front of the tree. He saw a Taoist using a lightning sword to attack the body of the demon locust, but the result was very little. The demon locust was almost unharmed, and it paid no attention to the Taoist, only gnawing on the tree trunk. He recognized that this was Zhenren Yi of the Taihao sect. He went forward to greet him and also took out two swords. He went forward to slash, but the two swords only left 2 marks on the back of the demon locust. He couldn't help but feel surprised. That Shenjian shook and turned into a Taoist. He said, Zhenren Qiao, previously when we fought with the North Sea sword, our swords were slightly damaged. You haven't refined the two of us, so it's difficult for us to use our abilities. I'm afraid that even if we slash 100 or 1,000 times, we won't be able to do anything to this thing. Qiao Jingdao said in a low voice, If 100 or 1,000 times doesn't work, then 1,000 or 10,000 times. We can't just ignore it. Shenjian sighed and said, Up to you. Not long after, Zhenren Xen of the Nanhua sect also arrived on a scarlet eagle. However, his sect's talismans had all been taken away, so he could only rely on his own magic power. The 3 of them surrounded the demon locust and used all their strength, but they couldn't do anything to it. After about a quarter of an hour, a ray of light suddenly flew over from the southwest. The 3 of them felt that the person coming was not friendly. They all stopped and revealed vigilant expressions. When the ray of light came close, it stopped. A tall and handsome young Taoist walked out. He looked down and said, Since everyone is here, you can stay. Tihongchan? The 3 of them suddenly realized that this Ping Du sect master's aura was far stronger than theirs. From the looks of it, he seemed to have cultivated to the nascent embryo realm. They instantly felt that something was wrong. If it was really as they expected, even if the 3 of them worked together, they couldn't defeat this person. Qiao Jingdao made a prompt decision and said, Jinren, retreat quickly. I'll stop him. He raised his hand and two sword lights flew out at the same time. When Qi Hongchan saw the two murderous swords coming at him, his expression became serious. With a wave of his sleeve, a canopy flew out and protected his body. At the same time, he stretched out his hand and pointed. Raging flames came crashing down. It looked like it was right in front of his finger, but it suddenly appeared close to Qiao Jingdao, as if it had crossed all the distance between the two of them. Qiao Jingdao couldn't help but be shocked. At this moment, it was impossible for him to dodge even if he wanted to, so he could only withdraw a protective treasure and release a strand of light to envelop his body. However, when he was struck by the flames, he was shaken to the point his soul trembled, and he almost fell from the clouds. His heart couldn't help but sink. He knew that with his own ability, he couldn't fight against a nascent embryo cultivator. At this moment, a ray of green light flew over from the sky and protected him. At the same time, a voice sounded in his ear, saying, Jinren Qiao, don't panic. With this great immortal tree here, he can't hurt us at all. He turned around and saw Jinren Yi making hand seals. The green light came from the great tree. However, this light could only cover a radius of a few miles. It looked like it couldn't be moved. When Qi Hongchan saw them like this, he smiled and didn't attack anymore. If the three of them stayed here, they couldn't attack the demon locust. His purpose of coming here had been achieved. When the divine tree was destroyed, it didn't matter if the three of them lived or died. In the Nether Spring sect, Elder Xinyu saw this scene and said, Sect leader, it seems like Yu Xiao can't hold on much longer. My fate is connected with him now. Should we help? Liang Shuani said, Yu Xiao school isn't just capable of this. Don't worry about it. We just need to deal with the Shaoqing sect. He turned around and looked in the direction of the Shaoqing sect. Under the continuous attack of the virtual images, the Shaoqing sect's absolute pleasure of heaven's heart technique was almost unable to stop them. At this moment, he suddenly thought of something and asked, Is the spirit cave guarded by people? Elder Xinyu said, With two Taoists guarding there shouldn't be a problem. Liang Shuani pondered for a while and said, Not enough. With these virtual images, the sixth sects will have fewer casualties. Go personally and don't guard it. Don't let anything happen. Elder Xinyu was stunned and said, Sect leader, if I go, sect leader, with Shaoqing sect's temper, they might come out before the mountain gate formation was broken. This group of sword cultivators was not so easy to deal with. Although they gathered the power of the six sects this time, they did not dare to underestimate them. If any cultivator was missing, it might lead to a lack of power, not to mention that 3 people were missing at once. Liang Shuani said, Yu Xianshao isn't easy to deal with. If he comes out, I need to focus on dealing with him and can't care about other things. If Pu Xiansheng from the Huanjin sect goes to the spirit cave, just the 2 of us may not be able to stop him. Elder Xinyu took a step back and bowed. As you command. Inside the formation of Butian Pavilion, Jinren Kongjing felt his qi was getting heavier and heavier. This was a sign that his fate energy was gradually being cut. His face couldn't help but darken. Their sects seemed to be in a stalemate with the Qinsong school here. Their morale seemed to be very high, but they didn't know how long it would take to break the mountain gates formation. The cultivators of the 3 sects couldn't move under the big immortal tree. Not to mention that no one could save them, even the mountain gates of the 3 sects became abnormally empty. If the situation continued to deteriorate, they would die without a fight. Right now, there was only one way, and that was to break the obstruction of the heavenly river. Then they could use their magic treasures to help. They could even send people to deal with the demonic insects. They could even open up a path of retreat. However, this price, he pondered for a while, then pointed behind him and said, Leader Tan, the situation is critical. Please use that mysterious technique to break the obstruction of the heavenly river. Leader Tan's body trembled. He said, But immortal, this, if, Jinren Kongjing said in a deep voice, I know what the consequences will be, but if we don't save the big immortal tree, we can't even talk about coming down. The technique he was talking about was the last mysterious technique that Butian Pavilion possessed. It was called Boundless and Boundless Zhou Yu Tong Tian. The power of this technique was extremely great, but it did not differentiate between self and enemy. Once it was released, any technique that disturbed the position, seized the spiritual opportunity, and stored the void would all be broken. Even the immovable circumference and Yuan Tian beyond the sky, from before, would be broken. What was more powerful was that even the mountain gates formation, the 9 continents small worlds, and the cultivator's heavenly abode could collapse under this technique. Tan Dingxian was silent. After a long time, he finally nodded. Xiao Lingyun said in shock, "Hold on. There are many disciples hiding in the small world's heavenly abode. Should we move them out first? If the small world's heavenly abode collapsed, those who weren't the immortal abode of the heavenly abode would be doomed." Zhenren Kongjing said, "It's too late. If our disciples die, we can still recruit more. If the divine tree falls, Donghua will no longer exist, and our fate will be gone. We will die immediately because of the technique. It's up to you to decide which is more important." When everyone heard what he said, they didn't say a word. Zhenren Kongjing then said, "Send someone to inform the 6 sects of Ling School. Don't blame me for not informing them when the time comes." Chapter 1191. After Zhenren Kongjing sent someone to inform the devil sect, he said, "If it's convenient for you, sect leader Tan, please cast the spell." Tan Dingxian bowed, then looked at everyone present and said, "Fellow Taoists, please guard your own grotto heavens. I'm going to cast the spell now." Everyone looked at each other and sat down cross-legged, their expressions extremely solemn. In fact, if they wanted to guard their grotto heavens securely, it would be best to enter the grotto heavens. That way, the inside and outside of the grotto heavens would be in harmony, and there would be a high chance of passing through safely. However, no one knew how powerful this mystic technique was. If they fell into the void realm, even if they did not die immediately, they would not be able to return. To be safe, no one dared to make such a choice. Tan Dingxian floated away and returned to the outside of the pavilion. He took out a jade talisman and threw it down. Mystic techniques passed down by predecessors usually needed to be enchanted with enchanted artifacts or strange treasures as sustenance. Otherwise, they could only be maintained for a few hundred years at most. And this boundless and boundless technique was attached to this square diagram. The jade talisman fell, as if it had fallen into the endless void. It turned into a speck of starlight and gradually went far away. At the moment when it was about to disappear, a spark suddenly burst out and rapidly spread in all directions with the square diagram as the center. Not long after, the land of the 9 continents was enveloped within it. At this moment, all the cultivators from the various sects who did not hide in the grotto heavens of the small worlds, as well as the rogue cultivators hidden deep in the mountains, as long as their magic power had not reached a certain level, their universe sleeves were immediately torn apart, and the magic treasures and artifacts inside were all shattered as the technique descended. On the contrary, some of the junior disciples did not have such items with them, so they did not suffer any losses. And this was just the beginning. This mystic technique did not all surge out in one go. Instead, it was like the tide, surging forward in waves, and its power was also stronger than the previous one. After this ray of light passed, very quickly, the second ray of light arrived. Wherever it went, the mountain gate formations of the small sects and small sects all collapsed. Many of the flying peaks floated in the sky. Many floating mountains and pavilions fell from the sky, and there were even collapsing mountains and cave dwellings that collapsed. Instantly, there were countless casualties. Wails could be heard everywhere. Zhang Yan also saw this phenomenon in the devil treasury, and his brows involuntarily twitched. Suddenly, his sleeve fluttered, and the dragon's soul essence leaped out. However, it was obstructed by the devil treasury and was unable to leave. He thought for a while and first moved to avoid the tribulation fire. Then he walked out. Then they went outside. The item turned into a beam of light and disappeared into the sky. His eyes flashed. He immediately knew that the profound technique that the Qinsong school had used was about to be activated. At this moment, a voice rang in his ears. It was sect leader Qin's voice transmission, telling him to be careful of the Yuxiao school's Xian technique. After listening carefully for a moment, he cupped his hands and said, "Disciple respectfully thanks sect leader Jinren for passing on the message." This technique was aimed directly at the grotto heaven. He did not know if he could avoid it by hiding in the devil's treasury. After thinking for a moment, he made up his mind and entered the Xianyuan utopia. He'd established the spirit splendor paradise, a true world of its own. It was not like the inner utopia, which needed to cling to the heaven and earth. If the tide of spiritual opportunity was slightly disturbed, it could be overturned. If even he couldn't withstand it, then there were only a few people in this world who could. To say the least, he really could not withstand it. That was not something that could happen in an instant. Before it shattered, he had already escaped. The only worry was that the tribulation fire would jump in and disturb him. Hence, he still needed to use the devil's treasury to protect himself. In the outside world, not long after the second beam of light dissipated, the third beam of light bloomed. This time, it was fiercer and fiercer than the previous two. Many Jinren of the grotto heaven felt their bodies tense up, as if they were in a storm. They knew that the crucial moment had arrived. They quickly made up their mind and focused their minds. They continuously moved their mana and spiritual opportunity to maintain their own grotto heaven. The Jinren of the grotto heaven who'd established their own grotto heaven were fine as they were extremely compatible with the inner world. As for those who inherited it from their ancestors, it was a little difficult. However, without the grotto heaven, it meant that they had lost a way to escape. If others had it but you didn't, then it was very likely that you would die before your opponent. Hence, they clenched their teeth and persevered. At that moment, the only one who was not affected was Tan Dingxian, the person who cast the technique. After about 100 breaths, the sound of the profound technique gradually weakened. Everyone thought that they had dodged it, but who knew that at this time, there was a rumbling sound in their ears, and a spirit aura that was several times more intense than before suddenly exploded out. In an instant, other than the 4 sect leaders, the nascent embryo cultivators, and a few grotto heaven cultivators with profound mana, the rest of the grotto heaven cultivators' grotto heaven started to collapse. Many of them knew that there was no way to salvage the situation. They sighed and gave up on trying to salvage the situation. At least, they could use less mana. Only a few of them refused to give up and were still trying their best to hold on. Jinren Kongjing hadn't stopped yet. He still looked calm as if he wasn't affected at all. He looked outside and saw that the profound technique on the top of the sky had not been broken yet. The White River still existed outside. He knew that it was not the end of the profound technique, so he didn't dare to relax. Not long after, the 5th spiritual opportunity surged up. In an instant, there were rumbling sounds that resounded in the sky above the 9 continents. At that moment, all the small worlds that were not protected by anyone were broken, and the cultivators hiding in them were all dead. At that moment, above the Qinsong school, there was a long roar. A huge Kuan appeared and spread its body, causing the entire sky to darken. However, it covered the small worlds of the Qinsong school and its allies. As for the grotto heaven cultivators' grotto heaven, it was too weak for the Kuan. If it used too much force, it would easily ruin it, so it didn't care. Jinren Kongjing gasped and said in shock, "Huge Kuan? I didn't expect Tai Ming Jinren to leave this thing behind." However, after thinking about it again, he relaxed. However, when he turned around, he saw that the expressions of the spiritual masters around him were not right. Some of their eyes were filled with fear. Knowing that it was inappropriate, he immediately said loudly, "Everyone, don't panic. This Kuan was very powerful 10,000 years ago. However, in the past 10,000 years, the spiritual opportunity of heaven and earth has changed. It's difficult for such a strange creature to survive in the world. At this time, protecting a few small worlds is probably its limit. It can't touch us." Just now, when Xiao Lingyun saw the Kuan, she was also shocked. If it wasn't for the oath, she almost had the urge to transfer to the Qinsong school. However, after hearing a few words, she immediately came to a realization and said, Taoist Kong Zheng is right. If this Kuan could touch me, why would it release it now? The outcome would have been decided long ago. Sure enough, just like what Kong Zheng said, the Kuan only floated in the sky and did not do anything else. As they spoke, the sixth spiritium rushed over. As it passed, the white mist river that lingered between the heavens and earth finally dissipated. Along with it, the two Xian techniques, Yuan Tian beyond heaven, and immovable circumference, disappeared. Not only that, the mountain gate formation also showed signs of collapsing. Even the Bu Tian Pavilion square formation map and the defensive forbidden formation were slowly dissipating. The only good thing was that after destroying so many small worlds and grottos, a lot of spiritual opportunity was immediately released, and the world was also cleared. Jinren Kongjing looked over and saw that although the mountain gate formation of Qinsong School was affected, it was protected well. Although there were signs of collapse, it would not be broken in a short period of time. He said, Everyone, don't worry about Qinsong School for now. Getting rid of the demon locust is the most important thing. Just now, Xiao Lingyun saw Qiao Jingdao and the others fighting against the demon locust, and she already had some clues. She said, It seems that the demon locust only has a body for Qinsong School, so it should be easy to deal with it. Even though the demon locust's body was hard to break, it did not have the baleful essence to protect its body. After all, it was not an invulnerable body. As long as one used magical treasures, it could be suppressed. The simplest way was to move it to another place, or simply use magical treasures to suppress it. It was just that Qiao Jingdao and the other two did not have deep cultivation, or they did not have the ability to do so, so they could not do anything about it. Now that the Milky Way had disappeared, the people here could return to help. After a short discussion, the Yuxiao School Palace Master Zhou Fenggong temporarily took charge of the overall situation, while Jinren Kongjing, Xiao Lingyun, and Shang Shuding went to deal with the demon locust. The rest of them did not move. In front of the big pan would Qi Hongchan saw that the Milky Way was broken, and there were 3 rays of light coming from the north. He wanted to stay behind to hold them back, but at this moment, he heard sect leader Qin's voice. His expression changed, and he looked at the 3 of them. With a cold laugh, he leaped up and flew back to the direction of the mountain gate. Jinren Kongjing did not chase after them. The other party was already a 3rd-degree realm cultivator. If they fought, it was unknown how long it would take. The most important thing now was to deal with the demon locust. Although Shang Shuding was anxious, he calmed down here. He carefully looked at the demon locust for a moment, then said, Fellow Taoist Kongjing, please use your technique. Jinren Kongjing nodded, and used a vast cloud of one-breath sky technique, trapping the 2 of them and the demon locust. He then pointed, and used mana to fix it in place, and said, Fellow Taoist, quickly make your move. Shang Shuding knew that he could not stay calm for long, and did not dare to hesitate. He took out a bamboo branch, and threw it forward. It instantly turned into a ray of green light, trapping the demon locust inside. It was not enough to suppress the demon locust. Xiao Lingyun took out the South Flower Master Imperial Spirit Bird's chart, and pointed at the strange locust. A white crane came out, and with a peck, it swallowed the green light. He made a hand seal and recalled the white crane. He cupped his hands and said, Fellow Taoists, with my map temporarily suppressing it, the demonic insect definitely won't be able to escape within 8 to 9 days. Jinren Kongjing turned to look at the great pool of Dragon Lake, and said in a deep voice, Why do we need 8 to 9 days? I think we will see the result in 1 or 2 days. At this moment, the Jade Sky sect had already stopped attacking. Since the Mountain Gate's great formation was about to be broken, they did not have to attack. They only had to wait for the moment to come. However, the stream of mystical water was still lingering above the great lake of Dragon Abyss. Hence, nobody dared to relax. They were only accumulating their mana and spiritual opportunity in preparation for the upcoming battle. Chapter 1192. The distant Milky Way technique was broken, and the great formation of the mountain gate was also in danger, but none of the people from Chinsong School revealed a dejected expression. Judging from the previous understanding of the situation, just now, that profound technique was the last resort of Butian Pavilion. If there were to be any more battles, it would depend on each clan's foundation. The Yu Tsang sect had prepared for a long time. They were prepared against the unprepared, and they were prepared against the unprepared. Their chances of winning were higher than their opponents. After a few hours, a ray of light flew into the hall and went straight to the main seat. It was the dragon soul essence that had been summoned back. Sect leader Qin extended his hand and grabbed it. He swept his horsetail whisk on it and then threw it into the hall. In an instant, it hovered high up and kept spinning there. At the same time, the shadow of a dragon could be seen spinning in it. The people on the seats looked at it and knew that the first few tests had been passed. From now on, it was time to officially start the attack. At this moment, outside the great pool of Dragon Lake, Tan Dingxian saw that the Dark Azure Sect's Mountain Gate Grand Formation was slowly disappearing, and the true appearance of the great pool of Dragon Lake was also gradually being revealed. Seeing that it wouldn't be long before it would be completely destroyed, she said, "Fellow Taoist Kongjing, are you preparing to make a move?" However, Jinren Kongjing extended his hand to stop her, and said, "Wait, it won't be too late for us to make a move when the battle starts at Shaoqing Mountain Gate." He said this because of two considerations. On the one hand, the Dark Azure Sect's great mysterious water formation had yet to be dispelled under the mysterious technique and was still circling in the sky. However, even though the Heaven Mending Pavilion's protective formation was gone, it still had the ability to attack. This formation could be handed over to Tan Dingxian to deal with, but he still needed to be careful. On the other hand, Shaoqing Mountain Gate's great formation just now was also affected. It was originally under the siege of the Devil Sect, so it could only be destroyed faster than Chinsong School. Then, the next thing would be simple. With the strength of the 6 Devil Sects, in addition to the continuous stream of illusions, they would be able to eliminate them if there were no accidents. He didn't expect them to turn around and help after defeating Shaoqing. As long as he could hold back Chinsong School and protect the lives of the cultivators on his side, in the end he only needed to use the flying feather technique to wipe out the other side. At this moment, he heard a sound coming from the west. The spiritual vigor suddenly became extremely chaotic. The Origin Room Hall Master came over and said, "Senior apprentice brother, it's a sound coming from the middle pillar state. It should be the Shaoqing Sect's great formation collapsing." Senior apprentice brother's prediction was indeed correct. Jinren Kongjing pondered for a moment and said, "It did not collapse. It should have been Shaoqing's family who removed it." The palace master of Yuanshe was startled, then nodded and said, "This is indeed the style of the Shaoqing sect." Jinren Kongjing said, "The more it's at a time like this, the more we must not be careless. We must also be prepared to use whatever methods we need to use." He turned around and said to Xiao Lingyun, "Sect Master Xiao, I'll have to ask for your help later." Xiao Lingyun knew that her sect did not have any profound technique that could help the alliance. The weight that she was showing now was far from the Heaven Mending sect and Taihao sect, so she could only put in effort elsewhere. She replied, "Our Nanhua sect will definitely do our best." Jinren Kongjing nodded slightly. At this moment, his gaze caught a glimpse of a sword light shooting out from the west. He smiled and said, "Shaoqing has made his move." Just now, when he said that, he seemed to have sensed something. His expression froze and he raised his head to look at the sky. Tan Dingxian and Xiao Lingyun did not know what was going on. They also looked up, but they did not see anything. Just after a while, the two of them realized that something was wrong. First, a thunder-like sound came from all directions, rolling and spreading everywhere. Following that, the entire spiritual vigor of heaven and earth also shook. At this moment, almost all the spiritual masters of the Grotto Heavens here felt that the place they were in was continuously falling. However, they immediately realized that it was not them who were sinking. Instead, the water of the 4 seas was like 4 walls that were continuously rising. Not long after, it passed over many mountains and rivers. However, even at such a high place, It did not slow down and continued to rise. From the looks of it, it would sooner or later cover the middle pillar continent. Jinren Kongjing circulated his mana. He sensed around and was shocked to see that all the seawater on the 9 continents was gathering in this place. Even the 3 continents that were originally half submerged in the ocean were revealed again. It was hard to imagine what such a huge amount of seawater could do. Facing this seemingly endless raging tide, he was also frightened. This Xian technique was called water sky hanging upside down. Sect leader Qin borrowed the power of the dragon soul essence to control the water of the 4 seas to flip into the vault of heaven and cover the 4 continents. At this moment, almost all the mountain sects had lost the protection of the formation, so they were completely defenseless. Even the cultivators of the grotto heavens would be deeply affected if they were to fight in the water. They would not be able to use their abilities as usual. On the other hand, this was very beneficial to the cultivators of the Qinsong school. Those who were skilled in water techniques could move freely. What was even more impressive was that the water contained the abyssal heavy water. Once it fell, not to mention that no one would be able to resist it, if all of it was pressed onto Jade Firmament Sect's Jade Cliff, it was unknown how long Master Lingya could withstand it with his transcendence energy. Sect leader Qin released this technique and swung his horsetail whisk. The water wall in the sky slowly pressed down. At first glance, it looked like the sky was collapsing. Sun Jinren saw that this was a great opportunity. He stood up and cupped his hands. Master, fellow Taoist Shaoqing has already made his move. Since that Yu Xiao school bullied us at our doorstep, we cannot allow them to be impudent anymore. Disciple requests for permission to fight. Sect leader Qin thought for a moment and nodded. Yes, but Yu Xiao definitely has a backup plan. You need to be careful. The current situation was too advantageous to the Qinsong school. If this continued, no matter how many people came, they would just be sending themselves to death. Therefore, as long as Yu Xiao's side had not given up, they would try to turn the situation around. Now, it was up to them to make their move. The 15 spiritual masters of the grotto heavens stood up and cupped their hands. As you wish. After a moment, more than 10 rays of clear qi shot out from the floating sky and entered the water screen. In the Nether Spring sect, sect leader Liang Xuanyi frowned. This time, they had clearly forced the Shaoqing sect to fight and were about to gain the upper hand. However, they never thought that the Qinsong school would actually use such a profound technique. Although the Nether Spring sect had a long history, for 10,000 years, they had always been suppressed by the Xianmen. Even if he could compete with the 3 sect leaders, whether it was in terms of the sect's foundation or strength, he was still far from the 3 sections. Just like the raging ocean in front of him, if he spared no effort in using his mana and given enough time, he could deal with it. However, if he wanted to erase it in one go, it was impossible. He looked to the south and muttered, "Let's see how Lingya deals with it." Outside the Shaoqing sect, Elder Shui seemed to have gotten rid of his shackles since the forbidden teleportation technique was no longer used. He went back and forth to kill and teleport. It was truly carefree. At this moment, he leaped out of the void with an extremely carefree leap. With just one sword strike, he split an illusory image. Then, with a turn of his body, he leaped far out of the battle circle. He took some time to look at the water screen in the sky. Without thinking too much, he knew what the Qinsong school had done. He could not help but chuckle. However, he was not worried about how he would fight after entering the ocean. Even if there were some obstructions as the opponent, Yu Xiao's side should be more restricted. In the sky above the 4 continents of Donghua, the overturning ocean pressed down and was about to cover the continents. At this moment, a chime was heard, and then a ray of spiritual light was cast from the south. A divine light suddenly appeared in Liang Xuanyi's eyes as he stared over, and he saw it extremely clearly. This light was emitted from the Jade Cliff, and the technique it executed was definitely attached to this treasure. Thus, its origins were worth pondering. Is it a mystic technique left behind by the previous generations of Master Lingya, or Jinren Yaohan? He took out a spell and began to examine it. After a while, he chuckled and said with a faint gaze, "So that's how it is." Once this technique is used, the outcome is hard to predict. However, without using this technique, it is indeed difficult to block the Qinsong school's technique. That ray of spiritual light quickly entered the Donghua continent, but it did not stop there. Instead, it spread outwards. Like the boundless and boundless technique, it enveloped the 9 continents. Sect leader Qin also saw it. He probed a little and immediately understood the mystery behind it. He transmitted his voice to all the Jinren under him. This is the space-splitting and world-chiseling technique. The mountains and rivers of the 9 continents are all separated and scattered. This technique does not seem to be something that Lingye can do. It should have been left behind by Jinren Yao Han back then. You all need to be careful. Elder Xinyu of the Nether Spring sect was originally sitting in the spirit cave. Suddenly, a strange feeling arose in his heart. He cast a spell to check the outside, but when he looked, his expression changed slightly. No matter how much he probed, he was always limited to a radius of 100 miles. What was even stranger was that there were a total of 3 of them. Just now, after the ocean in the sky fell, a fellow Taoist went out to check, but he hadn't returned yet. However, he didn't hear any sounds of battle, and he didn't know what happened. After thinking for a while, he called out to another fellow Taoist and leaped up the spirit cave. After a few dozen breaths, he was out of the spirit cave. However, what entered his eyes made him stunned. He was actually above a vast ocean. The waves were boundless, and his senses could only go as far as 1,000 miles. He wanted to probe further, but he could not. He stroked his beard and thought for a moment. When he was about to turn back, he found that the path he came from had disappeared. At this moment, sect leader Liang Xuanyi transmitted his voice to his ear. After listening carefully for a while, he understood his situation just now. He thought to himself, if that's the case, even if I don't move, there will be enemies coming to kill me. Since that's the case, I'll just wait here. On the other side, Zhang Yan also noticed the strange situation. In his senses, the entire world seemed to have become fragmented, divided into tens of thousands of small void worlds. If a cultivator passed through it, one moment he was in the southern cliffs continent, the next moment he could be in the western 3 continents. It was more likely that you wouldn't meet a single person for half a day, but once you did, there would be several enemies. Therefore, no matter which sect the disciple was from, fighting in this world depended entirely on their own luck. At this moment, his heart suddenly throbbed violently. His eyes flashed and he looked towards the north. The divine beast was about to be born. Chapter 1193. Zhang Yan had a vague feeling that if the divine beast was born, he might be able to borrow its power to deal with the tribulation fire. However, to reach that place, he needed to pass through the layers of broken space. This was not easy. It was a place that could be reached in a moment. He might have to walk for 10 days to half a month, or even longer. This profound technique was used perfectly. Just now, when the Yudzong sect drew in the water of the 4 seas, they had already gained an absolute advantage. However, with the counterattack of Master Lingye, they had once again leveled the power of both sides. However, speaking of which, if Butian Pavilion did not use the Xian technique that could destroy the surrounding space just now, Yuxiao School would not be at ease to use this technique. He thought deeply for a while. Right now, the people of Donghua were really trapped. In order to deal with the enemy, they had to pass through it. Who knows, maybe he could find a correct path. With that thought, he sat cross-legged, closed his eyes, and sensed with all his might. At this very moment, Palace Master Zhou Fenggong was standing on a high cliff, paying attention to the changes in the spiritual opportunity around him. Just now, when the Xian technique descended, he felt his vision blur, and he was in a valley. When he came out, he realized that he was in a completely different world. However, he calmed down because of this. In the Zhou clan, he was of the same generation as Kong Zheng and Bai Bai, so the secrets he knew were slightly more than the other members of the Zhou clan. He'd once faintly heard that the Zhou clan seemed to have a technique that could shatter the void. However, he was not clear about the specifics of this Xian technique. Before he understood the specific situation, He would rather stay where he was and not move. Suddenly, there was a ripple in the stream in front of him. He immediately stared over, and all the mana in his body started to circulate. After a while, he saw a handsome and elegant Taoist dressed in a feathered robe and a star crown walk out. He couldn't help but feel happy and hurriedly went forward. He bowed and said, "Senior brother." Jinren Kongjing nodded slightly. Spiritual Master Yuanshi looked left and right and asked, "Is it just senior brother?" Jinren Kongjing said, "Of course, I came to find you first." Yuanshi Jinren was startled. Then, he changed his mind and said excitedly, "Then, senior martial brother, do you know how to travel through the void and find others?" Jinren Kongjing laughed and said, "Since the esteemed master has used this profound technique, how could he not have a backup plan? Under master's guidance, I have already seen some of the mysteries of this technique." Although on the surface, the 9 continents seem to be divided into countless void spaces, a chaotic and fragmented mess. When cultivators walked on it, they didn't know where they would be taken to, but there were actually tricks to follow. As for finding the whereabouts of the others, it would depend on Jinren Kongjing's own ability. For a person like him who had already refined the nascent embryo, if he did not care about using his magical power, he could observe the entire 9 continents in an instant. It was not difficult to detect people who were familiar with the Qi, but if it was an enemy, he would not be able to detect them. However, if it was an enemy, he would have to spend more effort. Yuanshi Hall Master had other thoughts, and he said, "Senior martial brother, in the Qinsong school, Mengjida's skills are the highest. Since senior martial brother has such ability, why not find a few people of the same path and kill them? That way, the luck of the Qinsong school will be greatly damaged." Jinren Kongjing thought for a moment and then shook his head. "That is not appropriate. This person's cultivation technique is deep. If I can gather 5 or 6 people, under a situation where there is no one to help, I might be able to kill him. However, not to mention that it is not easy to find so many people in such a short period of time. Even if they were all gathered, they might not all be able to reach this person." Yuanshi Jinren didn't understand. Why is that? Jinren Kongjing explained. Just now, he understood that there were other mysteries to this mysterious technique. The more people gathered, the more likely it was that they would be scattered to different realms when they traveled through the void. However, if 3 or 4 people traveled together, there wouldn't be such a restriction. However, at the same time that this move gave the enemy a chance of survival, it also protected their own people. In reality, to Jinren Kongjing, people like Meng Jide, even if he was really nearby, he wouldn't take the initiative to find him. In a battle between nascent core cultivators, even if one side had 2 or 3 people, the advantage was not big. If they fought, the outcome was really hard to predict. If they were not careful, they might even lose their lives. In this situation, it was unknown how long the battle would last. It was necessary to reduce the consumption of mana as much as possible. Those with profound cultivation techniques should avoid it as much as possible. Yuanshi Jinren still didn't give up and said, "This is a rare opportunity. If we don't find Meng Jide, why don't we find that Qi Yuntian? If we can kill him, we can also deal a heavy blow to the Qinsong school." Jinren Kongjing said in a deep voice, "Although I can sense where everyone is, other than those I know, everyone else looks the same. It won't be easy to find this person. Right now, we can only take it one step at a time." Yuanshi Jinren's lips moved. He wanted to say something but stopped. Jinren Kongjing looked at him and said, "You want to ask why the master didn't pass down the acupoint of traveling in this world?" Yuanshi Jinren hurriedly said, "I don't dare." Jinren Kongjing said plainly, "I can tell you this clearly. To understand this path, you must first be able to peep into the 9 continents. If your cultivation is not enough, you can't feel the wonders of heaven and earth. Even if you know it, it's useless." Yuanshi Jinren didn't dare to ask further and quickly nodded in agreement. Jinren Kongjing grunted and sensed something. He said, "Not far from here, there is a cultivator. Looking at his Qi dynamic, he isn't from our sect. We will look for him now. If he isn't from our alliance, we can get rid of him first." He calculated on the spot and said, Follow me. Then he left first. Yuan Shizhenren hurriedly followed him. Although it wasn't far, the two of them passed through dozens of different boundaries. They walked through deserts, mountains, oceans, and hills before they found this person. Yuan Shizhenren looked over and saw a middle-aged Taoist in his 40s. He laughed and bowed. So it's Zhenren Zhao from Pingdu sect. When Zhenren Zhao saw the two of them, his heart couldn't help but sink. He took a deep breath and bowed. Greetings, Zhenren Zhao. Zhenren Kongjing raised his hand slightly and returned the greeting. He said, Zhenren Zhao, now our two sects are enemies. Since we have met you, we must take your life. Zhenren Zhao said in a deep voice, since we are in a calamity, who can escape? I am the same, Zhenren Zhao is the same. Zhenren Kongjing smiled indifferently and didn't comment. Yuan Shizhenren Kongjing didn't say much. He flicked his sleeves and immediately performed a vast cloud of one-breath sky technique, encircling both of them in a world. Pingdu sect and Qinsong school were allies. Since Zhenren Zhao knew that he was going up against Yuxiao school, how could he not be prepared? After a few breaths, he used an ingenious method and broke out of it. It was a pity that he was facing two Yuxiao cultivators. Just now that he had escaped, he felt the scenery in front of him change, and he was actually dragged in again. He sighed and understood that if no one came to save him this time, he would definitely not be lucky. He gave up on the thought of survival and immediately used all the talismans he had on him. Then he spread out his dharma and turned it into a four-armed, two-headed, 10,000-foot-tall god. It was surrounded by a dazzling golden light and rushed toward where the two of them were. However, when it was halfway there, it saw a starlight that covered the entire region rushing over. In a short moment, the Dharma disappeared under this light, and even its soul couldn't escape. Zhenren Kongjing waved his hand and calmly kept the remaining Hanli divine sand. He then removed the one-breath sky technique. Just now that he came out, he seemed to have sensed something and looked up at the sky. His brows furrowed slightly. Yuan Shizhenren saw that his expression was strange and asked, Senior brother? Zhenren Kongjing pondered for a while and shook his head. He said, Nothing, let's go to the next place. In the demon treasury, Zhang Yan retracted his gaze. From Zhenren Kongjing's action of accurately finding Zhenren Zhao just now, he could tell that even though the realms above the 9 continents looked broken and chaotic, there was a way of operation within. If he could figure it out, it wouldn't be difficult to find the right path. It was just that the other party had not passed through many realms, so it was hard to make a judgment. Since that was the case, he had to keep a close eye on this person. Even so, he would definitely sense it and try to cover up his qi dynamic, so that he wouldn't be able to see his specific actions. However, every place where the people of the heavenly abode were, it must be a whirlpool that absorbed spiritual vigor. Yuan Shizhenren was even better than his peers. As long as there was no formation to hide, no matter where he went, he would be able to find him. On the other side, Qi Yuntian was standing in the middle of the sky. Under his feet was a huge wave. Because he had cultivated the northern underworld true water, no matter where he went, there would definitely be waves and tides following him. From his point of view, instead of looking for opponents everywhere, it was better to take the initiative and transform a realm to make it his own. The land under his feet was tens of thousands of miles wide. It was originally a wasteland, but under the influence of his mana and spiritual vigor, as time passed, it gradually turned into a vast swamp country. About an hour later, nothing could be seen except the surging waves. If he was given enough time, it would not be difficult to turn this place into something similar to the Xianshui Palace. Then, it would truly be his home ground. At this moment, there was a gray fog in front of him. Above it stood a gray-robed Taoist with vague facial features. From the qi dynamic, he immediately recognized that this was a cultivator from the Muqing cult. The gray-robed Taoist also recognized his identity when he saw his appearance. Initially, he seemed to have some intention to fight, but when he looked at the surrounding scene, he hesitated for a moment. Then, he turned around and turned into a cloud of smoke to escape. Qi Yuntian knew that the cultivators of the Muqing cult were best at hiding, and they also had the ability to spy from thousands of miles away. On the surface, it seemed that they had retreated, but it was very likely that they were hiding beside him, waiting for the right opportunity to attack. He definitely could not let them go. Thus, with a flick of his finger, tens of thousands of lightning bolts struck. At the same time, the waves below surged up and swept up. The gray-robed Taoist felt his body become heavy as soon as he was touched by the water mist. Seeing that there were lightning bolts chasing after him, he had to stop and fight. First, he stretched out his hand and a jade plate appeared above him, blocking the lightning bolts. Then he took out a jade stone and threw it up. Instantly, it turned into thousands of mountains. He blew another mouthful of air, and all these mountains collapsed at the same time, transforming into surging dust and smoke that surged forward with the force to move mountains and push seas. Qi Yuntian recognized that this was one of the 3 supreme techniques of the Muqing cult, the technique of soaring dust. He wanted to end the battle quickly, so he had no intention to compete with the Taoist techniques. With a flick of his sleeve, a brilliant water light swayed out from the void. It was the heavens' united divine water forbidden light. In the next instant, the light surged, and all the dust and mist were swept into the void by the light, leaving nothing behind. Chapter 1194. While Qi Yuntian was killing the elder of the chaotic world of the 9 continents, battles of all sizes were taking place in the chaotic world of the 9 continents. However, at this time, because they didn't know what was going on around them, they focused on protecting themselves. Other than encountering difficult opponents, they would try their best to avoid encountering people of the same generation. Even so, in just 2 hours, 5 enlightened masters of the heavenly abode were killed. Other than the 2 who died at the hands of Qi Yuntian and Jinren Kangjing, the rest were killed by the cultivators of the Shaoqing sect. One of them was a blood soul cultivator, one from the Netherworld Spring sect, and the last one was enlightened Master Guy from the Bone sect. The 3 of them were also unlucky. There were 3 extreme sword cultivators in the Shaoqing sect. After the 3 of them fell into the profound technique, they did not hesitate to use their magic power. In a short period of time, they circled the entire chaotic 9 continents and successfully gathered in one place. The 3 of them leaped into the air and killed at the same time. Almost no cultivator below the 3rd realm could resist them. Even though the 3 cultivators of the Devil sect had many death substitution techniques, they were still killed. If the Devil sect didn't have an endless supply of illusions, the number of people they lost would be far more. This was just the beginning. As more and more cultivators of the heavenly abode became familiar with the spatial shift, they would no longer be cautious and their movements would become bigger and bigger. Somewhere in the sky, Xiao Lingyun, the leader of the Southflower sect, was riding on a 2-headed eagle. This spirit bird could be big or small, and it could also carry people to and fro. Although it couldn't cross the spatial shift, other than sword cultivators and a few people who were good at escape techniques, few people of the same generation could compete with him. Along the way, whenever he felt a spiritual fluctuation near him, he would avoid it and not come into contact with it. Not long after, they arrived at a place that was in the shape of a mountain. There were strange peaks and rocks everywhere, and there were ravines and valleys everywhere. After a few glances, he muttered to himself, "This is a good place to hide. Now that I'm here, I can cast spells." He knew that it was extremely dangerous for him to act alone. Even if he could win 1 or 2 people, after his magic power was used up, he would most likely lose his life. If he encountered another strong enemy, it was very likely that he would lose his life. Therefore, he decided to find a safe place and called out the mountain-guarding spirit rock, which was left behind by his founder. He then borrowed the sect leader's seal to control it from afar. This way, his chances of winning were high, and it wouldn't harm his magic power. If he had the chance to meet up with them, then even a 3rd-stage realm cultivator might not be his opponent in a head-on battle. He kept the 2-headed eagle osprey into the beast-subduing pen and found a call to land on. He used his transcendence energy to open up a cave and hid inside. He then sealed the cave door and took out the sect leader's seal to communicate with the spirit rock. At the base of the Nanhua faction. On the surface, it looked no different than usual. There were only a few junior disciples and servants left on the mountain. Because these people's skills were low and they stayed where they were, there were few injuries. As for those disciples with extremely high aptitudes and inner disciples, because they hid in the small grotto heaven first and couldn't retreat in time, they were all annihilated. Suddenly, a long cry came from Bigwing Peak, and the mountain rocks collapsed. Wind and thunder rumbled. A moment later, a gigantic shadow that covered the sky flew out and swayed. With a flash, it flew into the sky and disappeared. After doing this, Xiao Lingyun's confidence grew. With the help of the sect leader's seal, the spirit rock was now connected to his mind, and he could see everything it saw. He only needed to send an order in his mind, and he could command it to attack strong enemies for him. He took out a few pills from his sleeves and swallowed them. Although he didn't use much magic power just now, it was better to maintain his battle power at its peak. After adjusting his breath, he first tried to order the spirit rock to rush out of the heavens to see if there were any loopholes. But just now, after passing through the 8th layer of high cloud, he found that he had actually returned to the surface and was trapped in a lake. Only then did he give up on that idea. The spirit rock just flapped its wings, and the entire lake was swept into the sky by a hurricane. Before the nascent soul cultivators looked over, it had already flapped its wings and flew away. This spirit rock's speed was like a shadow, and it was said that it could travel all over the 9 continents with a flap of its wings. Although it wasn't really that fast, it was far better than normal escape techniques. After circling around the chaotic world space a few times, Xiao Lingyun also roughly figured out the way. Just as he wanted to summon it to his side, he saw 3 sword lights suddenly appear in the sky. They were like bolts of lightning, charging towards the spirit rock. Xiao Lingyun was shocked. Shaoqing Supreme Sword? Among the Shaoqing cultivators, he didn't want to meet the extreme sword lineage cultivators the most. Even if the spirit rock could win in a head-on battle, as long as they escaped, they might not be able to catch up. However, the other party was already tangling with him. Even if he escaped, he might not be able to get rid of them. He could only choose to fight. However, at this moment, something interrupted him. At this moment, there was actually a wisp of aura that was extremely close to where he was hiding. This was a huge matter that concerned his safety. He could not be bothered to control the spirit rock anymore. He let go of his restraints and let it deal with it on its own. Then, he retracted his consciousness and observed carefully for a while. He could not help but sneer. I was wondering who it was. So it's that rebellious disciple. You're unlucky to have met me. He stood up and waved his sleeves, coming out of his hiding place. Outside the cliff, Tao Zhenren stood on a huge rock. He held a scroll in his hand. It was the origin class and walking beast diagram. Seeing a streak of light coming over from the sky, he raised his head to look. After Xiao Lingyun came closer, he was rather surprised to see his calm expression. He said, "What? You seem to know that I'm here?" "I'm here to look for Sect Master Xiao." Tao Zhenren shook the walking beast diagram and took out a small beast's soul. He said, "Just a small technique. I'm afraid it won't enter Sect Master Xiao's eyes." Xiao Lingyun came to a realization. So it's the air-eating dace. However, this beast needs to find a cultivator's aura. You don't have such a method. If I'm not wrong, it was left by your master, right? Tao Zhenren bowed and said, "Today, I found Sect Master Xiao to help my master settle the karma of the past." He was able to find this place so smoothly not only because of the air-eating dace, but also because of the help of the Hui Dragon's soul. This sky demon could transform into thousands of clones. With it leading the way, and Xiao Lingyun hiding in one place for a long time without moving, it gave him a chance. Xiao Lingyun scoffed and said, "It must have been hard for you and your master to spend so much effort. However, I've seen many of your methods before. You being able to find a sky demon's soul is indeed your ability. However, if you want to win me with just this, aren't you overestimating yourself? If your master was here, you might have a chance of winning." Tao Zhenren said indifferently, "Whether it is or not, we'll only know after we fight." As the sect master of a sect, it was impossible for him to find trouble with him normally. However, with Yu Zhao's profound technique, he had a chance. At this moment, There was no mountain guarding spirit rock by his side to protect him, and no one from the same sect to help him. He could be said to be all alone. Xiao Lingyun glanced at the source diagram and beast diagram and sneered, "How many abilities did your master teach you?" He raised his hand and took out the South Flower Master Imperial Spirit Birds chart. He wiped his hand on the first rank of Strange Ho. In an instant, a featherless strange bird with 6 legs and 4 wings leaped out. Its 2 eyes were tightly shut, and its eyelids kept moving, but it seemed to be unable to open them. The battle between 2 South Flower Sect cultivators was to see who possessed stronger mutated beasts and spirit birds. As the sect master of South Flower Sect, Xiao Lingyun possessed all 5 grades of spirit birds in the spirit bird chart, and he even possessed more than 1 heavenly demon soul essence. All of these were inherited from Black Turing Palace, but he had kept it a secret in the past. This was also the reason why he was confident. Tao Jinren's expression slightly froze. He recognized that the strange bird was called Guan Yi. It did not have much combat power, but once it opened its eyes, it could immediately capture the souls of living beings. Even if he was a Grotto Heaven cultivator and could not capture it for a while, there was an enemy beside him. As long as he made a mistake, he would lose the battle. However, if he released the beast to fight, he would only be using his weakness to attack the enemy's strength. Fortunately, his cultivation method did not come from the same sect. He made a hand seal, and a large yellow hand immediately formed above his head. It stretched out and grabbed downwards. Xiao Lingyun sneered and used his mana to point at it. A green light flashed and instantly dispersed the large hand. But all of a sudden, a monster with bright feathers and a flat body that looked like a kite barged in. It lay on the Night Watcher bird, and in just a moment, it swallowed the soul essence into its body. When Xiao Lingyun saw it, he was shocked. He recognized the appearance of this demon. It was clearly the one that Zhang Yan had released during the battle in the northern underworld continent. His heart was filled with fear, and he hurriedly used his spiritual power to sense his surroundings. This monster was intercepted by Zhang Yan when he saw that Li and Mi had died in battle. Tao Jinren could not handle it alone in the South Sea, so he temporarily came to the South Sea to listen to his orders. After eating the Guan Yi bird, it tasted delicious. It circled in the air and rushed down again. Spiritual Master Tao took advantage of Xiao Lingyun's unsteady state of mind to summon the fine prisoner pot and sent out a command. Suddenly, there was a flash of spiritual light and 8 white Jiao dragons leaped out from the pot. He pointed to the front and they all rushed towards where he was. Xiao Lingyun felt all kinds of chaotic aura from the intercepted monster. He really did not know what to use against it. He was also afraid that Zhang Yan was close to him, so he suddenly had the idea of retreating. His body shook, and with a rumble, he revealed his dharma. He saw a red-backed phoenix spread its wings and floated in the air. It had a spirit cloud crown on its head, and a pair of pearls hung down from its chin. It swung its long tail, and a colorful light appeared as it leaped out of the encirclement of the white water dragons. On the other side, after staring at Jinren Kongjing for more than an hour, Zhang Yan had more or less deduced how to walk in the Void Realm. However, he also realized that the chaotic Void Realm was not unchanging. It seemed to be slowly changing. There might be a deeper layer of change. But now that chaos was everywhere, he could not wait any longer. After thinking for a while, he used his mana and the Devil Treasury leaped into the void. After a few hundred leaps, it finally arrived at the original location of the North Nether continent. As soon as he arrived, he suddenly felt a vast spiritual vigor rushing up. A consciousness connected with his body, and then the entire sea surface suddenly surged. Chapter 1195. Zhang Yan calmed himself down and raised his head to look. He saw raging waves rolling in front of him and a half-snake, half-tortoise emerged from the seawater. It was unknown how big its body was, but it had a thick back and was as tall as a platform. There was a long snake coiled around its body and its scales were wrapped around its heavy armor. It hissed and raised its head to devour. He instantly understood that this was a natural spirit. It had the chi of heaven and earth and the power of the stars. It transformed into a divine fetus and was born from the calamity. With his help, it was able to appear in the world. He couldn't help but laugh. He shook his sleeves and came out of the demon treasury. He floated up and stepped on its back. He turned his head and saw the tribulation fire floating over. This time, he didn't dodge. The tribulation fire leaped and was about to reach him when the black tortoise raised its head and let out a roar. The fire seemed to be swept by a strong wind, and after a few flashes, it suddenly disappeared. Zhang Yan frowned slightly. He could sense that the tribulation fire hadn't been extinguished. It was just temporarily suppressed by the collision of the black tortoise divine qi. If he let his guard down for even a moment, it would probably resurface again. He thought about it. The tribulation fire could be used by the other party. If he didn't get rid of it, there would be endless trouble. He might have to borrow the strength of this divine beast. Thus, he sat cross-legged and communicated with it with his mind to find a solution. This black tortoise was the god of the north. It didn't care about life or death. However, it appeared because of him. Their fates were linked together. If he was defeated and died, he would definitely disappear. Now that it was questioned, it immediately responded. It released a strand of majestic divine intent to wear down the source of the tribulation fire. Even though Zhang Yan didn't need to make a move, he couldn't leave now. Once he, the main character, went somewhere else, the fire would jump out again. Thus, he calmed his mind and sat still. The moment the divine beast black tortoise appeared, heaven and earth shook. Spiritual energy surged and everyone felt it. However, most people didn't know what happened due to their cultivation. Only a few people had the ability to examine it. Jinren Kongjing looked over and saw that the place where the North Nether continent used to be had turned into a huge void hole, sucking in the spiritual vigor of heaven and earth. Apart from that, he couldn't see anything else. Yuanshi Jinren asked, "Shixiang, how is it? Did something happen?" Jinren Kongjing pondered for a moment, then said, "From brother's point of view, perhaps the egg that Zhang Yan left in the north borrowed spiritual opportunity. It was born." Yuanshi Jinren's expression tightened as he asked, "What is that?" Jinren Kongjing muttered, "That thing seems to be able to conceal one's qi dynamic. It's hard to observe." He flung his sleeves and said, "Don't bother with it. Even if it's a little mysterious, it has to follow my will in the land of shattered space." Yuanshi Jinren nodded and said, "Senior brother is right." Jinren Kongjing looked at the sky and said, "This Xian technique has fallen for 6 hours, right?" Yuanshi Jinren immediately said, "Yes, it's neither early nor late. It's exactly 6 hours." Jinren Kongjing's eyes flashed and he said, "According to Master's arrangement, victory is here." Yuanshi Jinren was shocked and asked, "Master's arrangement? What is Master waiting for?" Reverend Kongjing smiled and said, "At first glance, Reverend's profound technique seems to only create chaos in the world, but there are actually other changes within it. At first, it's hard to see, but after 6 hours, it will circulate like our sect's vast star sky steps." Yuanshi Jinren was stunned at first, then his thoughts spun quickly. His face gradually revealed joy and he said, "If that's the case, it'll be like a smooth journey for us to cross the world." Vast star sky steps was a cultivation technique. It was also a form of formation footwork. When a cultivator took a step forward, he had to repeatedly cross thousands of formation gates and use the formation energy to sense the stars in the sky to refine his qi. Almost every true disciple of Jade Firmament was extremely familiar with this. If that's the case, then they can really walk around here and come in and out as they please. He sighed again and said, "It's a pity that we only know the position of the stars. The disciples are scattered everywhere and can't gather their strength to attack the enemy. Otherwise, this battle would be much easier." Reverend Kongjing gave a deep smile, raised his sleeve, and took out a jade token. He removed the restriction on it and said, "What do you think this is?" Yuanshi Jinren took a look and was shocked. "Spirit tablet? This tablet has a bit of Yu Xiao's soul in it. No matter where the tablet is, the original owner will be able to sense it." He thought for a while and said excitedly, "This is a great method. This way, no matter where we go, our fellow disciples will be able to sense it. However, there's a drawback here. Once the spirit tablet is damaged, if they die in battle, then their souls will really scatter and they can't even reincarnate. However, they are in the tribulation now. If they lose this battle, they won't have such a chance, so there's no need to think about this anymore. The two of them stood there for 2 minutes. Suddenly, there's a flash of light and a Taoist in his 30s with thick black hair and beard walked over. It's Hall Master Su Heng of Yuxiao School, Zhou Xianying. He came forward and bowed, "Greetings to the two Zenrins." Zhenren Kongjing nodded and said, "You've arrived first. 3 people is enough. There's no need to ask too much, just follow me." He walked in the familiar formation and headed towards the closest Qi dynamic. Not long after, he arrived above a swamp. A graceful lady stood in the sky. She curtsied and said, "I'm here to greet the 3 Zenrins." Hall Master Su Heng said, "It's Yuanying Sex Zhenren Wei." Zhenren Yuanshi glanced at Zhenren Kongjing. When he saw the latter nod, he said loudly, "Zhenren Wei, we're allies, so why don't we travel together?" Zhenren Wei hesitated for a moment, but he still curtsied and said, "Then I'll have to trouble you." Zhenren Kongjing didn't say much to her and walked towards another Qi dynamic. Zhenren Wei's eyes flickered when he saw the 3 of them passing through the boundary without any hesitation, as if they had walked 1,000 times before. Not long after, the 4 of them stepped into another boundary and bumped into a young cultivator with an elegant air. Zhenren Kongjing took a step forward and bowed. "Zhenren Xiao, it's been a long time." The Taoist on the other side was Qinsong School's Dongtian master, Xiao Rongyu. He glanced at the 4 of them and frowned before returning the greeting. Right at that moment, he felt an unusual movement in the distance. He turned around and saw 2 people there. One of them was Hall Master Zhou Yong of Yuxiao, and the other was Peak Master Wu Yunqing of Jingxing. Xiao Rongyu's expression was stern. With his skills and the treasures he had, he could retreat even if he couldn't win against Kongjing. But at this moment, the 6 of them were here, so it was impossible for him to escape. At this point, he also abandoned the thought of survival, and with a loud shout he circulated his Fa Li, and in a split second, the tide of water surged forward. Zhenren Kongjing said coldly, "Kill him." The next moment, the 6 of them attacked at the same time. On top of a mountain, Meng Zhen was setting up a formation token to calculate the theory of this boundary space. At that moment, he stopped and looked up. Zhenren Zhao's aura was originally in that direction, but it suddenly disappeared. He was silent for a moment and sighed. He continued to calculate. At that moment, Zhenren Kongjing and the others went to the next boundary after killing Zhenren Xiao. Because more than 4 people would be separated and chased to other places, Zhou Yong and Wu Yunqing were not in the formation this time. However, they knew the changes of the star positions. As long as they felt the location of the soul, they would be able to find it again in a short time. About an hour later, the 4 of them bumped into a Taoist in green. This person was about 30 years old, and he looked like a cool breeze and bright moon. He was extraordinary. Everyone recognized that this was Shaoqing Sect's Dongtian master, Cao Xiao. Seeing that the 4 of them came together, he did not bother to greet them. He swung his sleeves, and thousands of sword lights shot up and slashed at them. However, before they reached him, he suddenly retracted the sword lights and leaped into the air to escape. He saw dozens of star thunders exploding where he originally stood. When he looked over, he saw a beautiful female cultivator. He recognized her as the Yuxiao Hall Master of the Xinming Hall, Zhou Ruing, who often went out. He changed his mind and looked up to ask, "It's not a coincidence that 4 people from your sect came here. Do you know the trick to travel here?" Zhenren Kongjing said, "I can't hide it from you, fellow Taoist Chao." Cao Xiao nodded and said, "To be able to fight with several Yuxiao fellow Taoists, even if I die, I'll be happy." Zhenren Kongjing said, "Fellow Taoist has the sword escape technique. If you leave now, we might not be able to stop you." Cao Xiao sneered and said, "If I leave, I'm afraid all of you will go elsewhere to find opponents. Instead of having your fellow Taoists in trouble, why don't I bear the burden?" As he said that, he flicked his sword light, and a sharp glint appeared in his eyes. Moreover, I've cultivated the sword for more than 2,000 years, and I'm quite lonely. I'm looking for a fellow Taoist to go with me. Jinren Kongjing shook his head and said, "Let's do it." Yu Xiao's technique came from the same source. Now that they were activated together, the sky was instantly filled with starlight, and the sound was loud and powerful. Cao Xiao, however, was not afraid at all. A spot of sword light appeared, and it instantly turned into thousands of sword lights. He fought with the 5 of them alone. For a moment, the star fire and sword lights collided with each other, and the sky was filled with deafening whistling sounds. After fighting with them for half a minute, Cao Xiao felt that he could not hold on anymore. He fought against so many people alone, and the reason why he could last until now was because he did not hesitate to use his mana to use all kinds of divine arts. He was very clear that if he continued to fight, he would not be able to last more than 100 breaths, so he did not delay any longer. With one thought, he gathered all of his spirit mana into one spot, and the sword light instantly turned into one, charging towards Jinren Yuanshi. When Jinren Yuanshi saw his sword light coming, he had a feeling that there was nowhere to hide, but he humphed and actually took the slash head-on. After Cao Xiao used this sword, all of his mana was exhausted, and his sword pellet also fell to the ground. Seeing that his opponent was fine, he could not help but be surprised and asked, "The crossing of the stars?" Jinren Kongjing said, "Yes." The crossing of the stars was one of Yu Xiao's 16 techniques. If it was difficult for a fellow disciple to avoid the enemy's attack, he could use his own body to take the hit. However, he was a nascent body cultivator, so he could use a clone to replace it. However, this sword had its own mystery, and that clone of his was really killed. Originally, he could summon 6 clones, but in the future, he could only summon 5. Cao Xiao smiled, as if he did not mind not being able to kill his opponent. He only sighed and said, "In the past, I have only heard of this technique, and today, I have finally seen it for myself." Jinren Kongjing said calmly, "Losing one of my clones, Jinren Chao can rest in peace." He flicked his finger, and a starlight flew out. Following a rumble, everything in front of him was razed to the ground. Chapter 1196. On the clear jade spirit cliff of Jade Heaven Sect, a young Taoist with delicate features opened his eyes. 2 streams of clear air flashed behind him before disappearing. He muttered, "This divine art was completed in a hurry, so there are flaws in it. But now that the time is pressing, I have no choice but to do so." He stood up and stood at the edge of the cliff. With his hands behind his back, he looked down at the 9 continents. Just now, he had relied on the Xian technique passed down by the patriarch to catch the other party off guard and move the water of the 4 seas to outer space. However, this was only a slight delay. As the Xian technique weakened, it would eventually return. After all, Qin Song School was the first to start the tribulation of man. They were well prepared. If there were no follow-up methods, it would not take long for them to turn the situation around. Since it has already been launched according to plan, the attack should be like a thunderstorm. There will be no rest. I will not give them any chance to breathe or counterattack. But before that, I need to get rid of a variable. With a thought, he looked in a direction. Zhang Yan was sitting cross-legged on the black tortoise's body, using its power to wear down the tribulation fire. He could feel that under the majestic spirit of this divine beast, the fire was weakening bit by bit. Now, there was only a little left. Just as he was about to completely erase it and free himself, suddenly, an unprecedented sense of danger rose in his heart. Without any hesitation, his consciousness moved. The protective talisman given by sect leader Qin flew out and blocked in front of him. The heaven and earth seemed to have suddenly slowed down. In his eyes, a young Taoist in a fluttering robe could be seen crossing the sky from thousands of miles away. Then he pointed his finger. Ping! Like glass shattering, the talisman shattered at the command of a finger. The person seemed to be injured as well. His figure faded, but his momentum did not change. Although Zhang Yan saw all of this, he was unable to move his body. He understood in his heart that this was happening. If he was hit by this finger, his spirit would definitely disappear. And for the other party to be able to come in front of him, he thought that the two sect leaders must have been held back by him. He could clearly feel that the Black Tortoise was using all his strength to subdue the tribulation fire and could not free himself for a while. At this moment, the only one who could save him was himself. Thus, in that instant he did two things. One was to order the Black Tortoise not to worry about him. One used all his strength to subdue the tribulation fire, while the other called for someone to save him. The young Taoist saw that he was about to succeed. Suddenly, a bolt of heavenly fire descended from the 9 heavens and landed on his body. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and look beyond the sky. Jing-tsang. However, even though he was bathed in flames and his body was constantly dissipating, that finger was still moving unwaveringly towards the space between Zhang Yan's brows. However, with this obstruction, his momentum was inevitably slowed down. Just as the tip of his finger was about to touch the forehead, the tribulation fire was finally suppressed to nothingness. At the same time, Zhang Yan's divine will connected with the Black Tortoise. His eyes flashed, and with a loud bang his entire body exploded. The young Taoist let out a cry of surprise. Zhang Yan was not injured by him, but he had dispersed himself first. His physical body was here, but he was able to do this. He couldn't help but be surprised. At that moment, the Black Tortoise roared in anger. Its divine will swept over like a tidal wave. The young Taoist looked deeply at him, and in the end, the remnant of his body was finally destroyed. After a few breaths, Zhang Yan's body gathered together once more. A cold light flashed in his eyes as he looked towards Nantian. Master Ling Ya. Even though he had read many records, he didn't think that the true power of a mortal cultivator was far greater than what he had imagined. If not for the fact that his body of strength could split and combine, he would have had the help of the Black Tortoise's divine will. In addition, Patriarch Jing-tsang and the sect leader had given him a talisman to delay him for a moment. Just now, that attack had already killed him. He laughed coldly. He would remember this debt. If he had the chance, he would definitely get his revenge. The other party had not succeeded this time, so he was already on guard. With the protection of the Black Tortoise, he wouldn't have another chance next time. Now that the tribulation fire was gone, he was no longer restricted. He was about to charge into the sky of the broken world, but under his command, the Black Tortoise didn't move. Just now, at the critical moment, he had proactively sunk into the God-Beast's divine will and borrowed its power. Just now, he was able to move his body. In order to prevent Master Lingya from coming back, he still hadn't retreated. Just a little investigation revealed the reason. He saw that the Black Tortoise's body was covered by a bright light. He didn't know what it was, but although it couldn't harm the God-Beast at all, it was locked in place. He frowned slightly. This was Master Lingya's method. Although the light only restricted the God-Beast, he could still move freely. However, if he left the Black Tortoise's protection, it was hard to guarantee that the other party wouldn't attack again. Such a powerful enemy wasn't something he could deal with right now. He couldn't help but think, I wonder how the two sect masters are doing. Whether it was in terms of status or ability to fight, he could be considered an extremely important part of the Qinsong school. He understood that if the two sect masters could help him just now, they definitely wouldn't stand by and do nothing. Something must have happened. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, he suddenly felt two enormous divine wills descend upon him. In the next moment, he felt as if he had fallen into a mysterious place. He saw two Taoists standing before him. They were Yu Xianshao and sect leader Qin. He suddenly realized that the two sect masters had used a strand of their divine wills to illuminate this place. Their true bodies and Dharma bodies were still in their respective sections. Just now, because he was mixed with the Black Tortoise's divine will, he was accepted into this place. Using divine will to communicate, even if he said thousands of words, it would only take a moment for the outside world to pass. Sect Master Qin looked over and said, Fortunately, Hall Master Du Zhen is safe and sound. Yu Xianshao said, In order to get rid of you, Venerable Lingya deliberately planned and didn't hesitate to expose his own methods. Originally, we each had a method to save you, but if we acted hastily, we might not be able to guarantee that there wouldn't be any unforeseen events. This time, it's for the best that you can avoid it. Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said, "Fortunately, I have the Black Tortoise's protection and the talisman that Sect Master gave me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to avoid this disaster." Sect Master Qin nodded and said, "The appearance of a divine beast is indeed a big change. No wonder Lingya is so anxious." Zhang Yan said, "However, now that the Black Tortoise is blocked by the external light, do you have a way to get rid of it, Sect Master?" Sect Master Qin examined it for a while and immediately understood the reason. He said, "This is the treasure that Sect Master Yu Xiao has. It's called the Divine Light of Beauty. Anything that is illuminated by it can be stopped, but outsiders can't hurt it either. I think he knows that both of us are on guard, so it's difficult for it to fall on us, so he used it on the Black Tortoise. To get rid of this light, we need a Metamorphosis Mortal Cultivator to cast a spell. However, Lingya has already moved, so he won't give me such a chance." Zhang Yan asked, "May I know how long it will take?" Yu Xianshao said, "If no one disturbs it, it will be dispelled in 2 to 4 hours." Zhang Yan nodded, but he knew in his heart that although it didn't seem long, it was hard to guarantee that Lingya still had this thing in his hands, so he couldn't count on it too much. At this moment, Yu Xianshao said, "Just now, 2 of Lingya's clones came out at the same time. Even though they've been eliminated, 2 more will come after a breath of time. We need to see what's going on." After he finished speaking, he pointed with a finger, and a ray of light instantly split open in the field. It seemed like a bright sword light flashed, and it carried the divine wills of the 3 of them to penetrate all the concealing haze and see the truth. In an instant, they knew the ins and outs of this technique. The technique that Lingya used was called the 3 Glorious Stars, and it could split one's body into 3. Each body had 70 to 80% of the original strength. What was even more amazing was that unless these 3 bodies were killed at the same time, as long as one of the bodies remained, the other 2 could be split again. This profound technique had extremely high requirements. It required a disciple of the direct bloodline to cultivate one of the 4 Qis and 2 techniques of Yu Xiao school, the Glorious Star Divine Seeking technique, and to absorb the karmic luck of others. If this disciple was able to cultivate to the heavenly abode in one go, then the person in charge of the technique would be able to kill the disciple, and then the disciple would be able to be sent to be reincarnated once more. In this way, after 3 reincarnations, the disciple would be able to create 3 clones in one go in the end. However, the temperament of the disciple in every reincarnation was different. Not to mention whether or not the disciple could attain the heavenly abode, even the person with great karmic luck wasn't easy to find. During this period, the person in charge of the technique could only let nature take its course and couldn't interfere with any external forces. Thus, it was extremely difficult to accomplish this technique. Yu Xianshao pondered for a moment and said, "No, just now, if Lingya's 3 clones were to appear at the same time, coupled with Liang Xuanyi, then not to mention Taoist Zhang being unable to escape calamity just now, even the 2 of us would be suppressed by him. There must be a reason for this." Zhang Yan's eyes flickered slightly and he said, "Master Lingya obviously wasn't able to accomplish it completely." Yu Xianshao said in surprise, "How can Taoist Zhang be so sure?" Zhang Yan said indifferently, "Before I entered the Tao as a mortal, I was engaged to a daughter from the Zhou family of Dingyang. Later on, I received guidance from someone and found out that this girl was under Lingya's tutelage. She wanted to borrow my karmic luck to cultivate, so she went up the mountain and became a disciple of Qinsong." Yu Xuanxiao's eyes shone as he sized him up seriously. Then he nodded and said, "No wonder Lingya insisted on killing you." He thought about it again and raised his eyes to say, "In this case, Lingya's 3 clones were not completed. This is an oversight. I wonder if we can make use of it." Sect leader Qin said, "Whether we can or not, you can ask." As soon as he finished speaking, a talisman appeared in front of him. This was left behind by Zhenren Yuling, and it was also formed by a strand of his divine will. It contained a mysterious technique called knowing and not knowing. Using this technique, one could ask Jinren Yuling a question. As long as the answer was not outside of heaven and earth, and it was something that Jinren Yuling did not intentionally obstruct, the answer would be given. Qin Zhangmen pointed with his finger and immediately asked with his divine will. He knew the result immediately. He pondered for a moment and then said, Ling Yashangren's third clone is residing in his body. Because it is not complete, it is unable to move, it is indeed a big flaw. Just killing this body alone is useless. Later, I can use the mountain and mountain seal as a vessel and use the mysterious technique to move his other two clones into a space in the void. Then I will send someone to the mountain gate of Yuxiao and kill him. Then I will attack at the same time. In this way, this technique can be broken. Yu Xianshao thought for a while and said, if I make a move, Liang Xuani will definitely stop me. This matter can only be handled by our two sections. However, Ling Ye must have made some arrangements. He will not sit still and wait for death. The outcome of this move is hard to predict. Sect leader Qin said, I can give you the treasure of the sect and send a capable disciple to go. At this moment, Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said, Sect leader Jinren, this person and I have karma. This time, I might as well go and settle it. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.